I will now call the May 24th, 2023 San Diego County Board of Supervisors Land Use Meeting, Flood Control District Meeting, and Sanitation District Meeting to order. As a reminder, according to the board rules and procedures, audience members should not whistle, clap, stomp feet, or anything that disrupts the proceedings. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. Supervisor Anderson.
Here.
Supervisor Desmond.
Here.
Vice Chair Lawson-Remer. Chairwoman Vargas.
Vargas here. All right. The first item on the order of business is the report of actions taken yesterday in closed session. Oh, sorry, we didn't do closed session. We're now going to proceed with non-agenda public communications. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board on subject matters within the board's jurisdiction, but not an item on today's agenda. The only action that the board may take is a referral to the Chief Administrative Officer. Reminder, according to Rule 4, members of the public that are non-English speaking and need interpretation assistance will get twice the allotted time for their comments within, which is 4 minutes. To better facilitate the meeting, we'll have 5 speakers in person and 5 speakers via phone, and the rest of non-agenda public communication will be heard at the close of today's meeting. Can you please call non-agenda public speakers?
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We have 10 total requests to speak on matters not listed on the agenda, 2 individuals in person, and 8 requesting to speak by phone. For those that have requested to speak via phone, if you could please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We will begin with the in-person speakers. As your name is called, if you could please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. You'll then have 2 minutes to address the board. And now I'd like to invite forward the following individuals, Bryant Rumbaugh and Truth.
All right, good morning, everybody. Brian Rumbaugh still. So, Jim, I wanted to continue from yesterday. I do have a collection of these little pencils. You know, you guys are certainly paying for it. Ultimately, the taxpayer has been paying for it. I'm assuming that this is maybe like, what, 3 cents. Ultimately, I'm sure that there's plenty of people that would want to be vendors, and they would certainly want to pay, or I should say charge the county, you know, 10, 15, 20 bucks for this. Now, ultimately, when I was talking to you guys yesterday about those inflated cost analysis for that asphalt removal in Santa Leo Hills, you know, my question would be simply this: is that person that really speculated that job was going to be costing that much money, $200,000 versus $10,000 in real world? Are they incompetent? Are they unqualified? Are they scamming the population? Are they spending money that they didn't earn? Ultimately, when we find ourselves in a position where we're throwing money around, spending money that we didn't earn, we're going to end up with you know, plenty of corruption. That's right. Ultimately, when we have these lobbyists coming in here and telling you guys that this pencil right here should be sold for 20 bucks as opposed to 3 cents, what you're going to find is people that are married to this system. This system is, do you guys think that our national debt is going to be paid off ultimately? Do you feel that seriously we're going to be climbing our way out of this by spending more money, paying this off with more debt? It ain't going to happen. As I was watching yesterday's video, those women talking about, there were some men too from the ACLU talking about spending more money on the Fletchergate election. What we need to understand is when we spend money for these Google ads,
Oh, system of corruption. So, hey guys, how are you doing? This is walking, talking art truth back in the chambers. In the jungle, actually, right? Okay, so let's see. Nora, I want to say thank you for not cutting the speaking time yesterday to 1 minute, despite there being 37 items on the agenda that I lost sleep researching. Hopefully you'll reduce the number of items in the future for everyone's sake. And Jim, I didn't get to finish saying this, I got cut off yesterday, but if you join the good side, we have pizza. I would even share a pizza with you if you chose to vote against these colleagues in crime more often. So come on, pizza. Okay, now I'm really gonna go out on a limb here and have some fun. Now, I'm definitely not an actor, but I've got some imitations for everyone to enjoy. Everyone's free to try and guess who they are, so, okay. I would like to address the people. The system isn't supposed to work. The veil is lifting, and love will be revealed. Okay, you guys should know who that is. Oh, here's another one. Okay. pats on the back for you guys, but you guys won't even address it. It's a problem. All right, here's the next one. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Now, they didn't give me enough time on purpose, okay? But you all just need to watch this Rosa Corey video. Oh, wait a minute. This is much better than Rosa Corey, and I love Rosa Corey. But here, this one too. This is also very important. You can watch this on YouTube. Okay, let's see. I put these on. I see you, Davia Lynch. And I don't know, Nick isn't here. And Helen, she's not here, she should be. But I want to recommend this book to you. It's called How to Resist Tyranny. Bible doubles, what did you know? So thanks for your attention. And Nora, you know what I do on the phone during presentations? Research Sandag agendas.
Thank you. We will now hear from those that have requested to speak by phone. Again, we will be hearing from the first 5 callers. The remaining callers will be heard at the conclusion of today's session. When it is your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted and you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'd like to remind the callers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking, and we will begin with our first caller.
Good morning. My name is Diane Grace. I'm a mother, grandmother, and have served on numerous youth boards in the past. Yesterday, a community member with whom I volunteer shared with you information about a program at San Diego County High School called Start Smart. Teens and their parents or caregivers attend an evening presentation provided by the California Highway Patrol and community prevention organizations. It emphasizes the problems that come with distracted, drunk, and drug-impaired driving. Driving under the influence of marijuana has increased over the years, so our Start Smart programs emphasize the importance of not driving while impaired, whether marijuana, alcohol, or drugs. She shared information from the National Safety Council that, quote, it is unsafe to be under the influence of cannabis due to the increased risk of injury or death to the driver and others, end of quote. Later in the day, I received an announcement from Quest Diagnostics, the world's leading provider of diagnostic information services. They announced that the percentage of employees in the general U.S. workforce testing positive for marijuana following an on-the-job accident increased to its highest level in 25 years. With marijuana positivity rates being even higher in states that permit sales of marijuana. Quest Diagnostics stated, quote, intoxicating cannabis products can have a major impact on safety at work and have been proven to slow reaction time, impact memory, and impair skills essential to driving, creating enormous challenges for employers, end of quote. Driving under the influence of marijuana is a danger.
Thank you. Your time is up. We'll go to our next caller.
Good morning, Chair Vargas and County Supervisors. My name is Becky Rapp. I wanted to thank Supervisor Desmond for bringing SB 1207, the Cannabis Candy Child Safety Act, to the agenda at yesterday's meeting, as it will honor the promise and intent of Prop 64 to keep marijuana and its products out of the hands and bodies of our children. I'm grateful for the discussion surrounding these protections and want to thank this board for joining together with a unanimous vote of support. The great news is that Sacramento is listening, and with your support, AB 1207 made it out of Assembly Appropriations Committee yesterday and is now on the Assembly floor. It could even be voted on as early as Thursday. As you continue to discuss and direct staff on the socially equitable cannabis program that will allow for marijuana sales and operations in our unincorporated area of the county, I ask that you take into consideration the protections you voted to support yesterday, protections that will keep marijuana out of the hands of children. One example of this is the state of California has banned all marijuana billboards on interstate freeways for the sole purpose of the negative impact marijuana messaging has on children and youth. It would be wise to follow their lead and ban all marijuana billboards. If billboards on freeways are impressionable on our children and youth to the point of banning them, then I would think billboards in our communities and neighborhoods have an even more significant effect and should no way be permitted. I thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller.
Hi, Chana. I waited all day yesterday for item 31, but for some reason I wasn't listed. Not sure what happened. Proposition 64 makes California State a lot of money. Yesterday, KTLA actually reported $5 billion since 2018. But the proposition also said it would, quote, prohibit marketing and advertising marijuana directly to minors. Just as we expect parents and maybe gun manufacturers to be responsible when a child picks up a gun in the home and uses it, the cannabis companies who design and candy packaging and candy edibles must be held responsible when kids get into it. If you didn't do your due diligence, cannabis edibles can look like Sour Patch Kids candy, Nerds, Doritos, and others. I think Jim Desmond showed something yesterday. Why is no one doing anything about this? It's warped that this board has gotten almost giddy over the cannabis revenue. My teen cousin gets high every day. He's driving that way now. My kids are not allowed in the car with him. You don't talk about this issue. Does that mean you are okay with it? And I've tried to call my District 4 Fletcher office at least 5 times about this issue in the last 2 weeks. No one ever answers. No return calls when I leave a number. Maybe there's a staffer there at the meeting, but I don't know. If someone, maybe people need to start going by their office since you all work in the same building and see if staff is showing up and working a full day. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller.
Yeah, you guys are pretty ridiculous. I agree with what Bryant was saying because you act like spending more money is going to get you out of this issue. Like if I put more water in the boat that's making me sink, it's going to help. It's so great. And, you know, just the fact that when I'm talking to you guys yesterday about the sewer water that's going around to people, that they are, you know, tainting more reservoirs, that you guys so claim to want to preserve all this stuff, but you're in your districts, sewer water is being given to people, and you don't give a damn. You look like you're like a deer in headlights, like, well, what's wrong with that? But then if I sit and talk about giving you my sewer water, it's like you're like, she's crazy. That's what's happening, and you guys are charging people more just to take their sewer. And just like with the MTS stuff, you're not even giving people bathrooms, and you don't seem to care. But you want us all to walk and bike and ride public transit, and then you're not providing anything to ensure that people can do that in a way that is like you want to do it. I mean, who wants to work for anybody that doesn't provide them with a bathroom? And like I was saying yesterday, you guys get up and go to the bathroom as many times as you want. What if it was that you couldn't go until the end of the day or for some period of time, and you're sitting there holding it? But you don't care when it happens to other people. So you guys need to start doing something that shows that you pretend to care, because everything you're doing is pushing people into a 15-minute city, taking every freedom that they have and making them pay to enslave themselves. And it's just very disturbing because you guys act like you care, you talk about it, but you don't prove it, and then you sit here and you buy drugs with the people's money, and what? I mean, are they going to a trash?
Thank you. Thank you. Your time is up. And to note for the record, that caller was Audra. We will go to our next caller.
Consuelo, the truth is they don't care. They don't want a people who are engaged. They want a people who are in agreement with their bullshit attending these circus shows. So many scripted speakers yesterday, such a joke. The illusion of choice. Again, I am campaigning for people, all people, to start taking responsibility for themselves and stop living in fear. At this point in the game, because it's all just a game, you must know this truth. It's the lowest of the low, the weakest of the weak, the most easily manipulated, who are their puppets running the show. The elite know exactly the type to look for, those hungry for power over people. So stop perpetuating the system, stop voting, stop contributing to genocide, pedophilia, wars, homelessness, big pharma. You are just contributing to perpetuate the system, the same system, by voting. Let their system crash and burn. We know that this government is not a government for the people. Just look around outside. See all the bad that's happening out there. There's no progress, at least not for the people. They're a corporation, therefore they will never listen to us. We are merely collateral to them. Status slaves, you better start paying attention and question what in fact is going on. The future generations will pay dearly for your lack of interest in these puppets' corruption and their wicked acts. Agenda 21 is all they care about. Again, let their system die, let it crash and burn. Stop complying, become ungovernable. You're just tax cattle. We don't need government. They need us. We've never needed government. They've always needed us. Wake up, humanity.
Thank you. For the remaining callers that requested to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, please hang up and call back at the conclusion of the session. Chairwoman Vargas, that concludes the request for non-agenda public communication for this morning. And again, all remaining speakers will be heard at the conclusion of today's session.
Okay, thank you so much. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes, statements, and proceedings for the regular meeting of May 3rd, 2023, and the Flood Control District meeting of March 14th. Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. Oh, yeah.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors who are present and voting aye.
Okay. We now proceed with the formation of our consent calendars. I'm going to go ahead and pull the Sanitation District agenda item number 1 to hear it at a later time today, and then we'll continue on with the rest of our consent items, and then we'll have public comment for Sanitation District 1 agenda item 1 when we take that issue up again a little bit later on today. So with that, let me go ahead and go to my colleagues.
I have nothing to pull. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to move it.
Thank you.
Chair, I have nothing to pull, but I got a comment on items 7 and 8.
Okay.
This is applying to accept state grant funds on item 7 for the PACE program and the pilot carbon farming program. And I want to say thank you to PDS for identifying this grant opportunity. Agriculture is extremely important in my district, and I'm glad to see that we're looking out for the farmers with this item. And then on item 8, this is to adopt amending the SKIP program to allow for more community facility district opportunities. So I want to thank you for this other item as well. This is beneficial to many of the builders who are conditioned to construct public infrastructure as part of their projects. And I've heard that this can be made better in allowing for these community facility districts and in addition to assessment districts and what that can be allowed to pay for. I'm glad that it is here before today, so thank you for bringing this item forward, and I'll second the motion for the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple of comments on item number 4, and I just wanted to say thank you to DHQ for administering this program for the County of San Diego, the State Water Resource Control Board Beach and Bay Quality Monitor Program. The agreement with the state for the beach and Bay Water Quality Monitor is really essential for the region, particularly for South County, as we're trying to enhance our beach water monitoring program, so appreciate that. As we might remember, we declared the public health care crisis in the Tijuana River Valley, so this really helps our communities south of the 8 freeway, and so it allows us to also keep track of this data and collect the information that we need as we're moving forward. And then on item 6, I want to thank you also for bringing this item forward, the Multiple Species Conservation Program. This is really critical for our county sustainability and climate goals, and it protects our native habitats and wildlife biodiversity as well. And I appreciate that it's especially focused on the environmental justice communities. And so I'm really proud that it really is going to help some of the key areas in District 1 as well. So with that, I'm happy to go to, do we go to public comment already on this? No. Public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We have 6 total requests to speak on items on the consent calendar, 2 individuals in person and 4 requesting to speak by phone. Again, as a reminder, the sanitation item was pulled from the consent calendar for discussion. Any members of the public that requested to speak on that item, if you could please hold your comments until the board discusses that item. We will receive public comment on that item separately. For any members of the public that have requested to speak on the remaining items on the consent calendar, if you could please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll begin with our in-person speakers, and I'd like to invite forward Truth and Bryant Rumba. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board, and if you could please begin by stating your name for the record.
For sure, this is Truth. Items 1, 2, and 3 is 239 fees and 108 deposits being increased for the county's PDS, DEHQ, and AWM departments. Item 4 is the money agreement with the State Water Resources Control Board to monitor polluted beach water. Is the state being in charge the reason why Imperial Beach's water is constantly shut down? Or is that Mexico's fault? Or is that the United Nations' fault, since they're getting their way with our countries at Sandag, Dora? The total cost of this useless program is over $796,000. Item 5 is LAFCO, requiring a multiple species conservation program consistency review agreement to make sure that the City of Vista's annexation of 2 lands with homes don't interfere with the county's North County MSCP plan to take up land. Item 6, the county, the state, and the federal government aim to take up over 98,000 acres of land for the South County Multiple Species Conservation Sub-Area Plan. Since 1998, the county has spent over $136 million to monopolize land. Item 7, we've got the PACE program, where farmers sell out their land for peanuts to give the county eternal control over their property. And there's the future carbon farming program, which won't achieve anything except taking more land away from housing, of course. And it cost $1 million paid for by the state, who has a Pathways to 30 by 30 plan. That means taking up 30% of California by 2030. The UN's favorite number. What a coincidence. And keep in mind that the public only owns 40% of the land in California, so I guess they want it reduced to 10%. And item 8 is the state's community infrastructure program, funded by selling consolidated debt bonds. It's all used to create districts to collect fees who maybe make improvements that are reflected in home prices. There's also the state's communities development authority to create more debt bonds, all a racket. And then special districts like flood control join the pool to send us all off the deep end of debt.
All right, Brian Rumbaugh again. So pretty much item number, it's going to be 7. I'm also going to be talking about, grant funds. Now, those of us we all should understand a fundamental rule of economics is maybe, it's been said that there's no such thing as a free lunch. People need to understand that the word grant does not mean creating money out of thin air. It is not. I understand this system that we're all in. We got this federal government that's essentially borrowing money that's being created by this Federal Reserve. This sub-corporation state is then receiving theirs. We are now going to be applying for grant funds from the California Department of Conservation and Smart Land Management. I would rather have smart land management than dumb land management. But when I'm walking through these steps here and I see junkies that are on their last, literally crying out for help, okay? This declining society that we're all existing in, there is not one of us that is exempt from this. You are not immune to this, Jim, okay? We need to find a solution, okay? It is gonna happen. I understand that money is what makes the world go round, but also we need to implement some responsibility. We are looking for leadership. I know I care about the farmers too, man. That's why I don't understand when I see video clips of piles of tomatoes being thrown away, stamped out, milk by the truckload being dumped. 40% of food in this country apparently goes to waste. Okay? How is it that we bridge this we need to find a solution to this. And ultimately, it's gonna be a new organization. And I will be talking a couple more times for you, bud. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chairwoman Vargas, we did not have any public commenters call in, so that will conclude public comment on items on the consent calendar.
Please vote.
Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors who are present and voting aye.
Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is item number 9, increasing understanding of decarbonization efforts by conducting a local analysis of existing residential, commercial, and other infill renewable energy infrastructure throughout the county and identifying remaining available rooftop parking lot and other infill capacity for future renewable energy projects. I think this is Supervisor Desmond's letter, so I'm going to go ahead and
Thank you,
turn it
Chair.
over.
If I can kick this off. Just a couple items. First of all, I appreciate all the work that's been done on the regional decarbonization framework already. It's a noble cause, and I think staff has done a tremendous amount of work gathering data and conducting community outreach. The regional decarbonization framework is currently in draft form. We had a study done, and staff plans to bring back to the board later this year. In the meantime, I'm hoping to add value to it and to make sure that we have the fullest picture possible on decarbonization moving forward. I've heard from many of my constituents are concerned about the regional decarbonization framework and in its current form, particularly in that it doesn't include enough information to justify some of the cost assumptions that were being made. And so, as I understand, I'm not going to here to argue about the cost or anything, those costs or anything, but the regional decarbonization framework was compiled largely, the plan that's being done was using state and federal modeling and not really local modeling and local information or enough local information. So I felt it was necessary for us to gather more information locally. And there's a shift from traditional sources of energy to renewables, which I think is a good idea. But I think it's critical that we have as much information as possible and get this right. So since we're in the process of the decarbonization 2045, we should take time, I think, to assess our region, where we're heading, and what we have here locally. So what I'm asking to do is to create a study to serve as an addendum to the regional decarbonization framework that would include a local analysis of existing residential, commercial, and other infill renewable infrastructure throughout the county. So what's our potential in the county on existing rooftops and existing areas here, and identify remaining rooftop parking lots and other infill capacity for future renewable projects. The intent here is to give local decision makers like ourselves more information on how we can maximize energy production with the housing and the rooftops and the things that we have in hand already. So with that, I'm going to make a motion to approve item 9.
All right, happy to second it. I appreciate you bringing it forward. I think it really continues to advance the space of decarbonization, and I think it's important, especially in our underserved and lower income communities, to have strategies that include like the rooftop solar actions and battery storage facilities as well. So I think it'll actually complement the work that we are doing already. So it really is a co-benefit for community members as they're thinking about how do we reduce bills or making our communities more resilient. So I'm going to be happy to support this. I'm happy to make I'll second the motion, and then we'll turn it over to public comment first.
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We have 13 total requests to speak, 4 individuals in person and 9 requesting to speak by phone. I'd also like to note for the record, we received 4 e-comments on this item, all in favor. For any members of the public that have requested to speak on this item by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. And we will begin with our in-person speakers. As your name is called, if you could please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. I would like to invite forward the following individuals: Lee Rogers, Sonia Robinson, Truth, and Bryant Roomba. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board, and if you could please begin by stating your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Lee Rogers. Thanks for the opportunity. I think it's a great effort that y'all have been working on so far. I think it just needs a little bit more work on it. GAO Report 21-423T was a testimony before the U.S. Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. That study focused on how changes in the Earth's climate are expected to increase, thus posing risks to the electricity grid and our resilience. Study noted that while private companies own most of the electricity grid, governments play a significant role in promoting that grid resilience. Two major factors from anticipated climate change were noted, impacting transmission capacity and distribution lines. Transmission capacity, the large lines you see going out of the power production areas. Distribution, what you see more locally. Study noted that warmer temperatures and extended heat waves reduce the capacity of the power transmission lines. Most of us engineers already knew that. It also noted that temperatures and heat lessen the effectiveness of distribution lines. It also noted that the more frequent and intense wildfires in many locations damage those distribution lines routinely, reducing resilience. In summary, power production near the point of power consumption mitigates those risks presented by climate change. That increases our resiliency. Supporting increased use of renewable on rooftops, parking lots, supports not only our decarbonization efforts, mitigates risk, and increases our resilience. I urge you to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sonia Robinson, and I'm here to provide public comments for organization to Protect Our Communities Foundation, who agrees with Supervisor Desmond that a better understanding of local conditions relating to existing residential, commercial, and other infill renewable energy generation, with an emphasis on existing solar, is needed, including an analysis of remaining rooftop and infill solar capacity in order to provide information that will inform and guide the board in our decarbonization efforts. First, the Protect Our Community Foundation would like to make 3 recommendations to the board to incorporate before approving agenda item 9. The recommendation first is that the board direct staff to postpone any further actions to implement the RDF, including consideration of the implementation playbook, until the necessary study has been completed. The technical report must be presented to the board, the technical report presented to the board last August must be revised and updated to correct deficiencies and incorporate the results of the study proposed by Supervisor Desmond. Second, Protect Our Communities Foundation recommends that the board expedite the recommended analysis and direct completion of the study by the end of this year. No need exists for a 2 or 2.5 year contract. The necessary analysis can and should be completed in weeks or months, not years. Expediting the study will help ensure that San Diego Gas and Electric Company ratepayers are not burdened with unnecessary, expensive, and environmentally harmful new transmission line construction, as described in recent reports that are envisioned by SDG&E.
All right, are we on here? All right, Brian Rumbaugh still. So I am actually an electrician, and I can certainly tell you that it is very true. An electrical conductor, more or less the ampacity that it would allow current to flow in free air would be much greater than if it was in a conduit. Now, when it comes to decarbonization, I just really want to talk to you guys about this. This is actually just a video that I saw that I found almost stupefying. There was about 6 global experts, people talking about the decarbonization problem and really the climate crisis and all that stuff. They were on, and the master of ceremonies, let's just call him, he asked them, what is the percentage of our atmosphere that is carbon dioxide? That is this gas that we're fighting. One of them said 5, the other one looked just, I'll go with 5 too. Another one said 8, and another one said I'll split the middle and say 7. The person putting on this seminar told them it is 0.04% of our atmosphere, okay? So ultimately, you know, I have installed solar systems before, PV systems. I do understand that there's certainly a place for them. When our electrical grid, when all of our let's just say transformers, a boost or buck transformer, is when our grid goes down, if and when it does, we don't even manufacture those in this country anymore. We've shut down our steel mills, okay? We've had states that have just been ruined, okay? And these same companies were supplying the steel to our adversaries that were fighting and causing World War II, okay? And I understand, understanding research is researching history is a big flaw that I've noticed in my 9 months in this room. And I'm not proclaiming myself an expert.
Hey, Tara, this is Truth. Wild lithium fires are the future. In 2021, these supervisors decided to environmentally and economically destroy the county with a regional decarbonization framework. This plan was introduced with the help of the United Nations Sustainable Solutions Network, who builds pathways towards achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals in the United States. We call that treason. I remember last year on April 26th when Tara inquired about solar panels on county buildings.
Proposed plan to move to 100% rooftop solar.
Supervisor, I'm not sure that that's even possible. I don't want to come back with a plan that we can't possibly achieve. I don't want to give you any impression whatsoever that this is even slightly possible to have.
How long would you?
That was fun. And boy, did Nathan hate that answer because it revealed the ridiculousness of everything. So, Jim, your considerations have easy answers. Number one, no amount of wind turbines or solar panels is going to cover the county's electricity demand. Number two, the cost of electricity is high and it's never going down, and especially not with communist community power plants. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, San Diego is paying 0.477 per kilowatt hour for electricity. That's about 3 times the amount that anywhere else in the country is paying. So all electric everything will just completely destroy the economy and leave everyone in the dark. And number three, the impacts to land conservation will be devastating because all of this lithium-based infrastructure, all of which takes up countless acres of land, is toxic, flammable, and non-recyclable, especially the RDS lithium mining of the Salton Sea. But I do appreciate your efforts, Jim, at securing a local analysis rather than relying on the state or the federal government's phony data. But I disagree about considering other approaches to decarbonization because I follow basic science, which shows that plants require carbon to provide us oxygen. I need to protect everyone's right to breathe, the right to life. Net zero means zero human life. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from those that have requested to speak by phone. When it is your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted and you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'd like to remind the callers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking, and we will begin with our first caller.
Hello, my name is Serena Pelka, Policy Advocate at Climate Action Campaign, where our mission is to create a zero-carbon future through effective and equitable policy action. We support a thorough analysis of local renewable energy conditions, including a cost-benefit analysis. Decarbonization is critical to reaching the zero-carbon future our communities need and deserve in order to live healthy, resilient lives. In order to get there, we need the most accurate assessment that is representative of the benefits local solutions like rooftop solar provide to communities, including improving equitable access to clean energy. Local distributed energy resources build resilience in our communities, and their potential to improve energy capacity and lower costs should not be understated. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to our next speaker.
My name is Tammy Baker. I'm a Borrego Springs resident. I first like to thank the board and fully support the intent of the regional decarbonization framework. Green energy is important to all of us. As a Borrego resident, I'm concerned about the current study's recommendation that utility-scale solar farms be placed in Borrego Springs. For those of you who have not visited Borrego, turning our desert views into seas of buzzing solar panels would effectively turn our rural community into an industrial community. And so I fully support Supervisor Desmond's proposal to conduct a more in-depth local analysis and hope to find better solutions than those that are proposed in the current study. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to our next speaker.
This is David Garman with the Tub Canyon Desert Conservancy in Borrego Springs. Good morning, Chair Vargas and Supervisor Desmond and Anderson. First, I'd like to say how grateful I am that the board is taking the threat of climate change seriously and is taking powerful actions, such as the creation of the RDF, to address the threat. And secondly, I'd like to thank Supervisor Desmond for listening to the more than 1,400 constituents who have signed a petition asking for correction of the errors and omissions in Chapter 2 of the technical report, which deals with electricity generation. Because the RDF will be guiding our actions in multiple domains for decades to come, it's worth taking the time to get it right. And unfortunately, Chapter 2 of the technical report is a case of inaccurate inputs leading to inaccurate conclusions. And it's for this reason that I hope the board will begin the process of correcting these errors and omissions by supporting the measure before you this morning. I understand the county will rely on outside consultants to produce this study, and I urge the board to employ consultants who do not have ties to the investor-owned utility industry. And additionally, I believe this analysis can easily be completed this year, and that the results used to revise the technical report before the report and the playbook are returned to the board for a vote in 2024. I believe it would be imprudent of the board to make a determination about the current draft of the report and the playbook before these corrections are made. And while there are other inaccuracies in the RDF that must also be addressed, such as the disregard for the economic costs of remote industrial scale generation, I and hundreds of others view this proposal before you this morning as a great start to the process of improving a document that will serve as a roadmap for all of San Diego County for decades to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller.
My name is Nikki Symington. I'm a resident of Borrego Springs. I also would like to thank you for for your effort in the area of climate change. I think that's a very significant issue. I would like to warn you about one thing, though, as a resident of Borrego Springs. You might ask, are there any examples of why we shouldn't put solar in the desert? I would draw your attention to a May 24th article in The Guardian called How Solar Farms Took Over the California Desert and an Oasis Became a Dead Sea. The point of it is that people think everything's dead out in the desert when it really isn't. Some of the largest carbon sequesters are desert plants, and they're all underground, so you don't see them. There's a forest down there sequestering tons and tons of carbon, which, when become disturbed, releases the carbon. So you kind of put installations to reduce carbon while you're releasing carbon when you disturb the desert. I would just like to say that you know more about the desert before you look into placing it as the obvious place. Cheap and dead. It's not. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller.
My name is Rebecca Falk. I'm the chairperson of the Borrego Springs Community Sponsor Group, and I want to say that I do support this item, and I'm happy and grateful that Supervisor Desmond has put this before the Board of Supervisors. I do have some requests that the timeline be changed to up to 180 days for the report back to the Board of Supervisors with a focus on rooftop parking lot and infill solar and the cost of transmission lines so that we have that critical information early, and so a report can come back more quickly than 180 days if possible. That the report come back before the Board of Supervisors considers the RDF so that the regional decarbonization framework can be amended or corrected if appropriate. That the consultant hired by the county have no ties to utility companies. If needed, there are community groups that can help vet consultants to make sure this is the case. There was no time between hearing about this item and the upcoming meeting of the Borrego Springs Community Sponsor Group to bring this item to the group in time for this meeting. But based on our past discussions and votes on the RDF, I am certain that the group would support this item and the request that I'm making about it. Borrego Springs residents want to protect our park and town from utility-scale energy projects, powerful transmission lines and towers that would harm the Anza Borrego Desert State Park and our town's economy. Passing item 9 with the above additions will help do that. The RDF reports, as they stand now, have already resulted in 3 contacts to me about utility-scale projects in Borrego Springs, despite that our transmission lines out of our town already are maxed out. Please vote for this item with the requested additions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chairwoman Vargas, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is, oh, so I don't go ahead and do it. Oh, go ahead. Do you want to speak? Yes. So, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. First of all, I think this is, I'm pretty excited. I think it's really important that we take a careful look at what we could do on infill and rooftop solar. I think that's great. This has definitely been one of my top commitments. And I think my colleagues would be happy to know that at San Diego Community Power, we've moved forward an aggressive agenda to prioritize infill as part of San Diego Community Power's renewable investment strategy. So I think it's quite in line. And I think I would hope that the opportunity analysis here would not just contribute to the RDF, but could also contribute to the work we're doing at San Diego Community Power to really help us think about and do a better job of identifying opportunities. Just had a couple thoughts, comments for I hope staff could consider as you put together the study. I think the first one is just making sure that we're looking at future opportunities, not just current, not just what's the current status quo, but what could we imagine and envision as future opportunities, and really looking at opportunities and not just where could you today have like a turnkey project. I think that's pretty important, and I do think it will also be helpful to take into account whether there could be additional savings for ratepayers from not having to go through transition lines or having as much investments in transmission lines, but instead looking at how we could have battery storage paired with infill, so we could have more of like a distributed grid. And so it's not just when we're looking at costs, let's also look at the savings that could be generated by battery storage paired with infill, and so we could have more distributed power networks. I think that's a big part of what makes infill so exciting and attractive, which, how can we potentially not have as much of a reliance on additional transmission lines going out to the desert. So those were 2 of the big things I kind of wanted to just highlight and hope that we can make sure are foregrounded in the study that comes back. Okay. If that's, hopefully that's in line with what my colleague envisioned, but I think this is great.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you brought up the transmission lines, because in the study that UCSD put forward was that there was no estimated cost for that, even though they did a cost analysis that was left out. So I like the fact that if we can do the decarbonization without additional transmission lines, I think that would be ideal. But I would ask, I guess, and it is coming back in 180 days, if staff could also look at, if there were transmission lines, what would be that cost, so that we know, if we could have savings, with batteries or other things like that, how much we could save and put towards that effort instead of the transmission lines. So just a rough estimate cost, we don't need.
And let me just, sorry, one other thought just to point out, there is a staff team now at San Diego Community Power dedicated to focusing on identifying practical, immediate investment opportunities on infill and rooftop solar, because they actually need to do it tomorrow. yesterday. So that might be, there might be a partnership there that would be worth exploring.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
Thank you. We're going to go back to item number 1 with the sanitation district. So I'm going to go ahead and open up for public comment.
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We have 3 total requests to speak, 1 individual in person and 2 requesting to speak by phone. I'd also like to note for the record, we didn't receive any e-comments on this item. For any of the members that requested to speak on this item by phone, if you could please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We will begin with our in-person speaker, and I'd like to invite forward Truth. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Hello, everyone. This is Truth. Thanks for pulling this, Nora, so I could write a speech while sitting over there. All right, we got sewer service to nearly 37,000 customers in the unincorporated county located in Alpine, Campo, East Otay Mesa, Lakeside, Pine Valley, Spring Valley, and Winter Gardens. But do they have any idea what's going on? I have a feeling they don't. The sewer rates have already gone up by 9% every year for the last 5 years. That's a rate hike by 45%. That's way more than the inflationary rate. Yet staff is recommending a minimum increase of 5.75% per year and a maximum increase of 10.25% per year. The latter would give the sanitation district an extra $9 million within 8 years. Dirty greed in need of sanitation services as far as I'm concerned. Supposedly, the fees will allow the accelerated replacement of higher risk infrastructure. But what has been improved with the sanitation district capital improvement project money? Every area is suffering from crumbling infrastructure of all kinds in this county and country. So the district, they say, if they don't impose these rate increases today, they're going to need $6.6 million each year. But you know what I say about that? I say they're not operating within budget. What's wrong with them? Get it together. I mean, you can't blame inflation. Your rates are way past inflation. Now, the district's supposed to provide a well-maintained sewer system that protects the health and well-being of the community and protects water quality. So I hope so, because if we're going to have the sewer water as drinking water, then I guess you have to protect the sewer water, because it's going to be the same thing as the drinking water. I guess the 2 entities are just going to combine into one. It's going to be fun. But I think we actually need to sanitize inflated and impressive fees by throwing this item's proposed increases into the garbage, because it can't be recycled. I'm sorry. I thought about it. Can't do it. So there you go. Thank you.
And Chairwoman Vargas, not seeing any public commenters calling into the call-in line. That will conclude public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm happy to make a motion. Is there a second? Second. All right, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
All right. Next item on the discussion is item number 10. This is, dear Lord, I know, Traffic Advisory Committee related. And so we'll go ahead and do public comment.
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We have 4 total requests to speak, 1 individual in person and 3 requesting to speak by phone. Again, I'd like to note for the record, we did not receive any e-comments on this item. Again, for any members of the public that requested to speak on this item by phone, please dial into the conference line now. Using the instructions that were provided to you, we'll begin with the in-person speakers, and I'd like to invite forward Truth again. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
I disappear into the night like shadows on the wall. The darkness is where I live, my unsafe place to go. This is Truth. Much like Sandag, Nora, I'm thinking that the Traffic Advisory Committee is one of those things that could be eliminated. I mean, heck, if cars aren't going to be allowed under Sandag's Mobility Hub's stupid smart city implementation of the United Nations 2030 agenda, then why do we even need speed limits or traffic signs? If technocrats get their way, Jim, there will only be a handful of self-driving cars for the top brass apparatchiks anyway. U.S. Department of Transportation's Complete Streets, the San Diego City Council's Slow Streets, and even green streets are all here now. Green streets is my invention, by the way, but it's coming too, I'm sure. Everything to create as many obstacles as possible for drivers in order to de-incentivize driving. Hence why the speed limit is being reduced on Hamashaw Road in La Presa, and why there are a total of 7 always stop signs being put up. Soon they'll add on the complete streets extended bulb-out curbs to go along with the sustainable slime green bike lanes, reduced parking, and reduced car lanes. And after all the traffic obstacles are put up, then next up is taxing people off the roads. That's where Sandag comes into play with their future road chargers, soon to be renamed, and Behavior Modification 2025 Regional Plan, coming soon to this Friday's 9 a.m. meeting, which Nora is very interested in what I'm saying, but that's okay because I'll be talking to her again. So I'm going to say these TAC recommendations and all future TAC recommendations, that we throw them out into the street and let a speeding, gas-guzzling, GHG-emitting, V8 engine, Hummer, just run them over. Here we go. I got the effect. Just a second. Here we go. Just like that.
Thank you. And Chairwoman Vargas, not seeing any of the public speakers calling in, will conclude public comment on this item.
All right, with that, is there a motion to approve?
Move.
A second? Any additional any additional comments? Seeing none, please vote. It's okay. Okay.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present, voting aye.
Thank you. The next item is item 11, set a hearing for June 28, 2023, public hearing to confirm fiscal year 2023-24 levies in the San Diego County Street Lighting District and Landscape Maintenance District, Zones 1, Rancho San Diego, and number 2, Just Martin Park, and related CEQA exception. Can we go ahead and call the speakers for public comment?
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We have 4 total requests to speak, 1 individual in person, and 3 requesting to speak by phone. Again, I'd like to note for the record, we did not receive any e-comments on this item. Again, for any of the members of the public that wish to speak on this item by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll begin with the in-person speakers, and I'd like to invite forward Truth again. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Thank you. It's Truth. Where's the presentation stats? So I have time to work on the Sandag agenda. What I learned from item 8 is that these created districts survive off debt bonds and fees people pay with the hope of receiving services in return. Debt sounds like a disservice to me, but then the special districts join the pooled program to create more debt bonds to keep operating under. Something for nothing. In this item, we have the County Street Lighting District, managed by the County Department of Public Works, which charges each single-family resident in the unincorporated areas $2 a year. Luckily, that price isn't expected to raise. Are more streetlights being installed in the unincorporated areas, though? I wonder if it's enough and in the right places to justify that high $2 price. And are they the stupid smart streetlights by cameras with the license plate readers? That's important to know. There's also the Landscape Maintenance District Zone Number 1, Rancho San Diego, managed by the County Department of Parks and Rec, which will increase rates to $38.58 per single-family residence every year. The reason given is inflation, of course, but that's a problem that can start being reduced if we stop the practice of things like debt bonds, or you supervisors accepting debt dollars from the federal government who gets that funny money printed from the Federal Reserve with nothing of real value backing it. Regardless, people affected by this increased rate don't even get to vote about it because it's within the maximum in the ordinance. There's also the Landscape Maintenance District Zone Number 2, Just Martin Park and Julian, also managed by DPR, which charges each single-family resident $47.82 a year for the park. And luckily, that one's not going to raise either. That's good. So we got 2 out of 3 fees going up, just like everything else around us going up in price at the same time. Which reminds me of the same solution I provided yesterday for emergency medical services, where people in the affected community gather together to fund services themselves without relying on government bonds that create more debt and a weaker economy. You got to copy Jewish people. They know what they're doing.
And Chairwoman Vargas, not seeing any public commenters calling into the telephone line. That will conclude public comment on this item.
All right. Is there a motion to approve? Second? Is there a second? No, is there a second? I'm trying to be inclusive here. All right, we have a motion and a second. Additional discussion. Seeing none, please vote.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
Okay, wonderful. All right, the next item is a very important item for all of us. This is options for removing barriers to housing and facilitating the county status of pro-housing jurisdiction exemption to the California Environmental Quality Act. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the team because I know they have a presentation, and then we're going to have public comment, and then we'll have a discussion as a board. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairwoman Vargas and members of the board. I'm Davia Lynch, Director of Planning and Development Services, or PDS. I'm joined by Mark Slovic, Rami Telly, and Vince Nicoletti, also with PDS. In response to your direction earlier this year, we are excited to present to you today a broad suite of strategies and initiatives designed to help remove barriers to producing housing. This includes everything from guaranteeing building permit review times to providing financial incentives for development, all to reduce the time and cost of creating new housing and incentivize its construction in the unincorporated area. For this item, staff from across the organization came together to identify innovative new tools and audacious approaches to help address the housing crisis. In response to the needs of our community affected by this crisis, particularly people who make a low and moderate income, the board and staff have taken a variety of actions to make housing more available and accessible. We're here today in response to the board's February 7th, 2023 direction for staff to return in 90 days with recommendations to facilitate housing production and the county status as a pro-housing jurisdiction. Staff from numerous departments across the county that work on housing came together, including staff from Planning and Development Services, Department of Public Works, Department of Environmental Health and Quality, Economic Development and Government Affairs, Housing and Community Development Services, the County Fire Authority, Department of Purchasing and Contracting, and the Department of General Services, along with support from County Council. Together, as a county team, we identified actions for your consideration that could remove barriers to housing in unincorporated communities. These reflect a collection of ideas and feedback that we've heard over time from stakeholders. Some of these actions presented today are pushing the boundaries of what we've done before, like guaranteeing plan review times, and would require a meaningful ongoing commitment of resources. Others are enhancements to existing tools or new technologies that would involve a one-time investment. We've sharpened our pencils to make sure that, while high level, we've made realistic assumptions regarding costing for the staff needed to implement these measures, including accounting for things like the higher vacancy rate than we have seen historically, inflation in IT contracts, and the time and training it will take to bring new staff up to speed and to retain them in the long run. All these efforts are designed to provide a high return on investment in terms of the elements of housing production that we can influence, largely reducing time, cost, and uncertainty for developers of all sizes, with approaches that would highlight the county's leadership on housing. We've broken down these actions into short, mid, and long term based on the time it would take to implement, as well as the level of stakeholder interest and diversity of opinions around each. Some of these actions are staff recommended and could be implemented now. Some are recommended but need more stakeholder engagement before moving forward. And others are presented without a staff recommendation and require further board discussion and consideration. We also frame these based on recent policy direction from the board related to housing. Within each of these timeframes, the actions are also costed out based on which category of housing the board may wish to apply them to, such as only 100% affordable housing, in VMT efficient and infill areas, for workforce housing, or for all other housing. The board may choose to direct actions that facilitate housing in one or more of these categories, as they are each distinct and not inclusive of one another. For example, taking actions for affordable housing only would have a different cost than taking action for all the categories of housing. If the board selects multiple categories, staff would add the cost to implement each to identify the total investment required. I'll now turn it over to the team to talk more about the specifics of what we put forward, as well as to provide some background on the pro-housing designation.
The California Pro-Housing Designation is awarded to cities and counties that implement zoning and land use policies that favor development, accelerate housing production, reduce costs, and provide financial subsidies. The county was recognized by the state as one of only 4 pro-housing counties in April of this year. This will allow affordable housing projects in the unincorporated area to be more competitive for critical state funding, a signal of our commitment to housing, and a tool to help increase local affordable housing supply. For today's presentation, staff developed 17 short-term actions with an implementation time of 0 to 12 months, which were organized into 4 broad categories: changes that would reduce review times for housing projects, innovations including process improvements and IT changes, additional customer support, and financial incentives. Actions 1 through 13 are listed in numerical order on the action sheet provided, are recommended by staff at this time, and were developed based on stakeholder feedback. Additional actions are either recommended for additional stakeholder engagement, should the board wish to move forward, or provided for consideration. Each action will be reviewed next, along with the associated time, cost, and staffing required to implement. Timeframes required to implement each item are based on departments receiving funding and staffing for any actions selected. As we present the actions for consideration, they'll be organized by category and not presented in numerical order. The first 3 short-term actions pertain to the process where applicants design projects and submit them for county staff to review to ensure they meet federal, state, and local requirements regarding environmental impacts, as well as health and safety. The first 3 actions would make changes to guarantee review times by adding staffing resources and offering a new process to ensure quality submittals. This reduces review times and moves permits for housing faster. Short-term action 1 would guarantee review times between 2 and 30 days, depending on the type of review for projects with 100% affordable housing and emergency shelters. Short-term action 2 applies to housing in VMT efficient and infill areas, guaranteeing review times of 15 or 30 days, depending on the type of review for projects. For these timelines to be guaranteed in actions 2 and 3, additional staffing would be required, and applicants would need to certify a third-party review of submittals that demonstrates completeness, which we'll discuss in action 5. Short-term action 3A applies to workforce housing, guaranteeing review times of 15 or 30 days, depending on the type of review. Workforce housing includes non-deed restricted housing that's typically 80 to 120% of area median income. Short-term action 3B would apply to all other housing, guaranteeing review times of 20, 30, or 45 days, depending on the type of review. Actions 1, 2, and 3 are distinct options that are not inclusive of one another. Short-term action 7 would direct staff to implement a program where previously approved home designs that obtained a building permit could be issued by appointment without submitting plans for a check. Some custom home builders use nearly identical home designs on multiple projects. Currently, when these projects are submitted for staff review for a building permit, they are processed in the same queue as other projects. This action would establish a program to track when a design was previously approved and allow the applicant to contact staff for an appointment that would be over the counter in our permit center to compare the proposed new project to a previously approved permit to ensure the new project meets code requirements with minimal changes. Short-term action 13 deals with grading permits. In recent years, the state has allowed more housing types by right, meaning they do not require a discretionary permit. However, under the current grading ordinance, an applicant for these new by right housing projects could still need a discretionary grading permit, adding time and cost. This action would update the grading ordinance to allow these new categories of by right housing to no longer require separate discretionary grading permits. This would align our local grading ordinance with state changes. Staff would conduct the environmental review at a policy level when preparing a proposed grading ordinance amendment. Short-term action 15 would require a complete application and plan set to be required before staff review a project. While many applications are incomplete or missing information on plans, staff recommend additional stakeholder engagement should the board wish to move forward with such a mandatory policy. It often takes staff time to review a project application to determine if there's missing information. If a complete application policy were in place, staff would halt a review once it's determined the project is missing information or incomplete and send it back to the applicant to update. While some efficiencies could be gained by a mandatory completeness policy, such a policy could disproportionately impact less experienced applicants. Short-term action 4 directs departments to prioritize procurements supporting housing, including as-needed contracts for plan check and inspection services, and contracts for ordinance or policy updates related to housing. The Department of Purchasing and Contracting would need 2 additional staff to make these procurements a priority, expediting future contracts. Short-term action 5 emphasizes process improvements. It's common for applications to be incomplete or not demonstrate they meet code requirements. This causes reviews to take longer and almost always adds an additional review cycle to projects. Action 5A would establish a voluntary program where a third-party specialist will review applicant plans to certify they are complete and to code prior to submittal. For example, building permit applications that had a private company plan reviewer with a building official certification review before the plans were submitted to the county had reviews that were done much quicker with much fewer corrections needed than other projects. Action 5A builds on this concept to develop similar protocols for other permit types. Departments would work with stakeholders to develop the program. Applicants that utilize this voluntary third-party review and certification would be eligible for the guaranteed review times discussed earlier. Action 5B would expand the use of standard corrections for permits. Presently, some programs have standard plan check corrections online and available for applicants to use and review prior to submitting applications. Essentially, programs using these are showing customers what we look for when we review plans. Action 5B would direct departments to expand the use of these standard correction templates, including more outreach for customers on how to use them. Action 5C includes information technology changes, both public-facing and internally-facing, to increase public access to information, including the status of project applications or pushing more services online. Internally-facing changes would give departments more reporting tools to communicate on projects that span multiple departments. Short-term Action 6 is a request for the Department of Environmental Health and Quality to enter into a sole source contract to conduct septic reviews for land development projects. The contract would be with the California Association of Health Administrators for an estimated amount of $450,000 annually for 5 years. The group has experienced members that can serve as contract support for DEHQ to conduct septic reviews faster. Short-term Action 9 deals with customer guidance tools. This action would take the most common and useful information for customers and have departments create short videos to help customers navigate the land development process. Videos will include tips to shorten timelines, how to check the work of their own consultants and contractors that are interfacing with the county departments, among others. The videos would be offered in multiple languages. Short-term Action 10 deals with new housing legislation. During the past few years, the amount of new housing legislation has increased significantly in California. Departments share draft legislation with our stakeholders, conducting community engagement to ensure stakeholders and communities understand the proposed and approved changes at the state, so we can craft ordinances that work at the local level. Action 10 would add 3 additional staff positions for additional community and stakeholder engagement on housing legislation, ensuring more public participation in the process.
On July 14, 2021, the board updated the housing element of the general plan, including an implementation plan with over 60 programs to remove constraints and improve existing housing stock. Since adopting the housing element, the board has focused heavily on housing affordability and increasing housing production and directed additional items to aid in this effort. These include developing the housing blueprint, preparing a housing construction cost analysis, exploring a green building incentive program, and investigating increasing the region's workforce housing opportunities. Short-term Action 12 would involve efforts to ensure that implementation of the housing element, as required by the state, is prioritized. Adding new positions to the Long-Range Planning Division within PDS is recommended to keep up with demands and continue to be responsive to current and future board direction on housing items. While the housing element will continue to be implemented if these positions were not provided, the resources would not be aligned with the expanded workload and future needs to ensure affordable housing and that communities remain healthy, thriving, and resilient. Action 8 would provide greater customer support. Departments process over 20,000 permits a year, helping customers as they work through the land development process. There is not, however, a dedicated team to help customers that may need a bit of extra support. Short-term Action 8 would add 4 dedicated staff to serve as applicant support or liaisons. Although these positions will not be able to assist on all projects, this action will pilot providing dedicated support on some of the more complex projects for customers who need extra support, understanding the differences between permit approvals by different agencies, and assistance with addressing issues with their project. Short-term Action 11 would involve PDS and EDGA leading efforts to conduct analyses that would identify development opportunities in VMT efficient and infill areas. Then coordinate with private property owners and prospective applicants that may wish to move forward with development. This action would add 6 staff between PDS and EDGA to serve as development feasibility liaisons for these VMT efficient and infill areas following the analyses. Short-term Action 14 examines infrastructure feasibility in new projects. Applicants have commented that infrastructure requirements are a large cost driver for new development. Staff could explore greater flexibility in infrastructure for new development, but this option could result in some projects not providing infrastructure at the time development occurs. However, there could also be situations where infrastructure is required for new homes, but doesn't align with the infrastructure in the existing community. For example, the requirement to underground utilities for new homes in a neighborhood with primarily above-ground utilities. Actions 14 is not recommended by staff at this time, as additional stakeholder engagement is recommended. If directed by the board, staff would identify the scope and resources needed based on stakeholder engagement. Short-term actions 16 and 17 are presented for board consideration. Action 16 would pilot a fee waiver program of building permits for a period of 1 year or until the funds are expended. Action 16A would waive building permit fees for affordable housing projects. Action 16B would waive building permit fees for our housing in VMT efficient and infill areas. In the unincorporated areas, there are locations that require a supplemental septic treatment system to support a new home. These are areas without sewer service. Short-term Action 17 would be a new program to provide grant funds for the installation of supplemental septic treatment systems for new homes. These supplemental treatment systems can cost between $50,000 to $100,000, which may be cost prohibitive for someone to build a new home and a supplemental system. Action 17 would create a grant program to fund approximately 75 of these supplemental treatment systems a year. For the short-term items, stakeholders noted the need for additional housing. There was support for the proposed actions, with no opposition identified for them during outreach. Stakeholders noted the critical nature of the timing to hire and onboard new staff and being able to implement these actions. There was also recognition that some of these items would need additional stakeholder engagement, such as Actions 14 and 15. 5 midterm actions are proposed, which are anticipated to take 12 months to 3 years to implement. These actions fall into the categories of reducing review times and innovations. Staff recommends midterm actions 1 through 3 at this time, but suggests additional stakeholder engagement for actions 4 and 5. Midterm Action 2 would direct staff to prepare pre-approved plans for single-family homes, expanding pre-approved plans beyond only ADUs that we currently offer. Staff would develop floor plans for multiple size homes and make them available at no cost to customers. Midterm Action 5 would waive special area regulations that apply in areas considered to have a special interest or design standards. Projects with these designators require additional analysis and discretionary permits, which can delay development and increase costs when located in areas with cultural resources or sensitive scenic or historic resources. This action proposes to waive special area designations for certain uses, such as housing, in order to streamline development process and provide more certainty for housing projects. Alternatively, special area designations could be removed or replaced with objective design standards based on environmental review conducted by the county. Staff recommends additional stakeholder engagement if this item is directed. Reduced analysis could impact unique resources and reduce transparency to the public. The county does not currently have a program that would allow movable tiny homes on wheels to be considered homes. However, there have been requests from stakeholders to develop a program that would allow them. Midterm Action 1 would create a program allowing movable tiny homes on wheels as homes or accessory dwelling units. Midterm Action 3 would be a second phase of information technology upgrades. Many of the actions presented will have associated IT changes to implement. Staff requested $1.2 million in short-term Action 5 and believe an additional $1.2 million will be needed to implement additional projects beginning in the next 12 to 24 months. This funding would build on the efforts in short-term Action 5, continuing IT changes that make housing projects move quicker. Midterm Action 4 would increase flexibility when modifying existing already approved projects. Presently, the zoning ordinance allows for a degree of change, often up to 10% for projects already approved. The process to expand or change beyond 10% is often more time-consuming and expensive. This action would direct staff to prepare a zoning ordinance amendment that would allow greater change beyond the existing threshold without the level of discretionary approval currently required. This would result in departments doing the analysis and environmental review up front, which would decrease the time and cost for individual applicants. Since changes to existing and already approved projects could have impacts to communities, staff recommends additional stakeholder outreach to occur prior to directing any changes to move forward. There was support for the proposed midterm actions. However, some stakeholders, in particular environmental groups, expressed concern with midterm actions 4 and 5, while other stakeholders had interest in these two actions being explored further.
The final 6 proposed actions are considered long-term as they're expected to take 3 to 5 years to complete. These actions emphasize reducing review times, innovations, and financial incentives. Long-term action number 1 recognizes that the county has previously identified key areas where future development is suitable. This action directs staff to prepare one programmatic EIR that would include much of the environmental review and analysis needed to facilitate future development within the 4 development feasibility areas and other VMT efficient and infill areas. The result would be faster permitting for individual project applicants. Specific projects would still need to conduct a site-specific review, but the level would be lower and easier since the county would have prepared a programmatic EIR. Long-term action item number 3 would revise the county's approach to CEQA. Presently, the county is lead agency for CEQA and works with consultants to determine if environmental studies prepared by private developers for individual projects are adequate under CEQA. An alternative approach that could streamline the review of housing projects would be to grant developers greater flexibility in preparing environmental studies and documents, reduce county oversight, and shift responsibility to the private developers in the case of legal challenges. This approach could streamline housing, but there could be environmental impacts or longer delays to housing construction should projects be litigated. This action is not recommended at this time based on its complexity and potential issues. If the board wishes the item to move forward, additional stakeholder engagement is needed to identify the scope, cost estimate, and timeline. There are a variety of state laws that provide public benefits such as transparency and fair competition. However, these laws may also act as barriers to housing when applied broadly without consideration of opportunities to streamline. Long-term action number 4 proposes county advocacy at the state level to seek specific CEQA reforms to streamline some housing types, housing in certain areas, or all housing in general, while still supporting CEQA's intent and achieving the county's commitments to sustainability, stakeholder engagement, and equity. This action is not recommended at this time. If the board wishes for the item to move forward, additional stakeholder engagement would be required to develop a project scope, cost estimate, and timeline. Action number 2 deals with land surveys. Physical markers used to help identify property lines to ensure setbacks are met and build housing can be lost over time. In some unincorporated communities, the survey markers can be difficult to locate. DPW periodically replaces the markers in these areas using an existing limited trust fund known as the Survey Monument Preservation Fund. DPW could focus this work in areas the county is interested in seeing more housing by utilizing the existing fund. If the board wishes for the item to move forward, no additional funding is requested to implement this action at this time. Staff is currently working with consultants to prepare the development feasibility analysis to identify barriers to housing in key VMT-exempt areas. One likely barrier could be a lack of infrastructure, such as sewer services, roads, bridges, or other core infrastructure. Another may be a need for multimodal infrastructure, like sidewalks, bike lanes, or trails, to improve the mobility and equity in those communities as they're built out. The development feasibility analysis will help us determine the required infrastructure, location, estimated cost, and how the county can contribute. Based on the development feasibility analysis recommendations, the board could allocate seed funds or direct staff to evaluate potential funding sources to address this. These funds would incentivize developers to build in desirable areas, help reduce housing costs, and support local communities' future growth. Staff doesn't recommend taking action now because additional stakeholder engagement is needed to develop a potential project scope, cost estimates, funding sources, and timeline. Long-term action number 6 would direct staff to prepare additional updates to the county grading ordinance to allow more permits to be issued ministerially rather than requiring individual discretionary reviews. Action 6A would direct staff to update the grading ordinance and prepare a checklist to allow ministerial grading permits within VMT efficient and infill areas if they meet certain criteria. Action 6B will add to the existing comprehensive Part 2 grading ordinance effort and will address agricultural and residential clearing and grading while including reviewing requirements, thresholds, and permit processes. Staff will explore ministerial grading permits within the unincorporated area, outside of VMT efficient and infill areas, based on whether they meet certain criteria. This effort will take approximately 3 to 4 years to complete and will be evaluated as part of the EIR required for the grading ordinance update. Staff recommends additional stakeholder engagement be conducted if this item is directed, and some stakeholders expressed concern that such changes could weaken CEQA reviews. There was support for the proposed actions. Comments were received from stakeholders on long-term action number 1, preparing a programmatic EIR for key areas to begin work sooner and expedite the time frame to complete. We estimate that there would be an extra cost of up to $1.2 million for additional consulting services and staffing to speed up the process and put in extra effort to ensure that stakeholder input is not compromised. This effort would reduce the initial estimated time frame from 3 years, as stated in the board letter, to 18 months. Environmental groups strongly opposed long-term actions 3 through 6, while other stakeholders were interested in these actions being explored further. In summary, there are 28 total actions presented today for your consideration: 17 short-term, 5 midterm, and 6 long-term actions. These actions are listed in numerical order and correspond to the option sheet provided. Now, I will turn it over to our General Manager, Sarah Agassi.
Thank you, Rami. Chairwoman Vargas and board members, we recognize that funding resources to support implementing these actions can impact other county programs and services. When the board directed the development of these options, LUJ departments had largely balanced their fiscal year 23-24 budgets. And based on the proposed 2023-24 operational plan for the enterprise, there are no ongoing county general fund dollars to fund these actions. Therefore, if the board directs implementations of actions in the Removing Barriers to Housing board letter, they will have to be funded through a variety of sources. This includes use of customer fees, one-time funds, and the redirection of ongoing revenue from existing or planned county programs. Understandably, these costs will need to be weighed against other enterprise needs as part of the county's budget process. When LUJ departments were preparing their budgets and fee packages, we addressed funding shortfalls of $19.2 million, up to 15% of the total departmental budgets in some cases, by healing ourselves to have a balanced budget. As such, the departments do not have the capacity to absorb these proposed options within their proposed fiscal year 23-24 budgets. We have looked at opportunities to shift funds from ongoing LUJ programs or one-time activities. For example, we have explored board-directed fee waiver programs that are not core services, either required by the state or that have life safety implications. This includes programs that incentivize green building, solar permits, accessory dwelling units, and programs that support equity and prevent foodborne illness for nonprofit and community events. However, these fee waivers provide benefit to the community and businesses. Within DHQ and Planning and Development Services, they have generated more permit activity. In PDS alone, solar permits are approaching 10,000 annually. For one-time funding, the board could allocate funds currently designated for the development of the Community Benefits Agreement Program or the Sustainable Land Use Framework. While staff is not recommending discontinuing any of these or any other specific discretionary activities, these are options for your consideration based on the board's priorities and available resources. If asked to go beyond the changes I've highlighted, there would be impacts to core services, including state-mandated and health and safety programs. These include stormwater compliance, the Enhanced Beachwater Quality Program, and compliance with building or engineering requirements. If the board directs recommendations before you today, the ongoing resource needs will be incorporated into the CAO recommended operational plan change letter. Funding sources will include fee revenues and general purpose revenue redirected from county program and service allocations. For one-time funding directed items, the needs would be addressed based on available general fund resources. I'll now turn it over to Davia for some closing remarks.
That concludes staff's presentation of options for removing barriers to housing. Staff from the various departments who have contributed to this effort are here today to answer any questions. The actions shown on this slide are listed in numerical order and correspond to the options sheet provided. We'll leave this list on the screen for reference as the board deliberates. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to public comment.
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We have 10 total requests to speak, 2 individuals in person, and 8 requesting to speak by phone. Also like to note for the record, we did receive 1 e-comment on this item, which was in opposition. For any members of the public that have requested to speak on this item by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We will begin with the in-person speakers. As your name is called, if you could please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals. I'd like to invite forward the following individuals, Bryant Rumbaugh and Truth. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board, and if you could please begin by stating your name for the record.
This is Truth, and Davia, I've also sharpened my pencil for this item. So tiny homes on wheels as an innovation, please. You know, those are called mobile homes. I don't know if you know that. Okay, things are being taken to a new low, copying the city of San Diego. And if they choose all oppressive options, they're going to take over $16.8 million from the general fund to do it. Even just the short-term options will cost up to $8 million. And the general fund will lose another $7.9 million to cover the building permit fee waivers and grants for septic systems. So if the county is going to mimic the city of San Diego, then that means the county is actually going to become an anti-housing jurisdiction. Just on April 25th, the city passed a totalitarian tenant displacement ordinance that makes landlords pay tenants 3 months in rent for their new place they're moving to. There was also buyout agreements where a landlord will pay a tenant money or other consideration to vacate their own property. That's called extortion. The city even passed item 330, which said, quote, landlords may increase rents, which could potentially drive tenants to lower rent neighborhoods and lead to tenant displacement, end quote. And they still passed it. Sean's housing train wreck is nothing to imitate. Nothing about him is worth imitating. But everyone's on the same dystopian agenda to eliminate single-family homes, real generational wealth with home ownership, to implement vehicle miles travel fees and restrictions on people and developers, and replacing real homes on land with high-density stack-it-backs crammed next to trolleys and no freedom of mobility hubs, all in line with the United Nations Agenda 21 plan. The county's not only going to lose real housing, but everyone's going to lose financial representation with a total of up to $25.7 million from the county general fund. That's the people's money. But that's okay. You know, there's going to be multimodal sidewalks. It's no wonder there's a mass exodus from California, leaving all of these homes empty. Thank you.
All right, Brian Rumbaugh still. So, you know, with regarding housing, it's certainly important. You know, I can tell you, I think I was actually about 13 years old the first time I wired a home. I've been a part of hundreds of custom home projects. Watching those projects, the flow of them over these years, it certainly has been interesting. Getting a grading permit is certainly, you know, very difficult anymore. There's a lot of barriers. And that's interesting how that has changed over the course of 30 years. I do know that my buddy Jim decided to jam out after I winked at him. But, you know, I'm going to talk to you because you seem to pay attention more than the majority of these people. No, I lost my train of thought. But ultimately, you know, when I hear, I wish I had the opportunity to look at that PowerPoint presentation. There's certainly a lot of additional funding, a lot of staff, you know, additions, let's just say. There were some good things in there, some common sense things that really, if we got back to the basics, it would be quite simple. You know, the whole idea of having the DPW involved with any sort of, you know, cost savings. I mean, they're the ones that estimated a $10,000 asphalt removal on a landfill that was contractually obligated by the county to restore for the kangaroo rat or for whatever. And they estimated it at $200,000 when in reality a productive contractor said it would cost him $10,000. You know, so once again, that person either doesn't take their job seriously or they're simply incompetent. Now, I know we got a lot of people in here that are a part of this system right now, and, you know, I have nothing against any one of you. I can tell you that change will be coming. We have to, because nobody is exempt from a society that's declining.
Thank you. We will now hear from those that requested to speak by phone. When it is your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted and you'll hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'd like to remind the callers they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking, and we will begin with our first caller.
Good morning. My name is Hannah Bay, and I'm Vice President of Government Affairs at the Building Industry Association of San Diego County. With nearly 600 members representing thousands of employees, the BIA is a leading voice advocating for all types of residential housing. San Diego County is in the midst of a severe housing crisis. We need housing of all types and in all areas. We need subsidized housing, and we need market rate housing. We need multifamily homes, and we need single-family homes. The crisis is real, and when you speak to residents across the unincorporated county, the lack of both subsidized and market rate housing is ruining the quality of life in San Diego County. San Diego builders stand ready to help solve the housing crisis. We want to build homes for San Diego citizens. The problem is the regulatory system keeps telling us no. The government system that the board and the state is in charge of has halted our builders' ability to get permits for homes in the unincorporated county. A broken government system is the reason why we do not have enough homes in our region. Up to 40% of the cost to construct a new home are fees paid to the government. So when the citizens ask why houses are so expensive in San Diego County, the answer is the existing regulatory environment in San Diego County. The state and the local government have created the existing barriers to housing. Today, we are asking the board to remove these barriers so that residents in San Diego can sleep at night in a high-quality home. Our residents have a right to be able to own or rent a home while also being able to have enough money to buy food and live a high quality of life. Our one ask today from the BIA is to prepare a programmatic EIR for the county to expedite and streamline residential development countywide. Our residents are in crisis, and 18 months or 3 years is too long to solve this issue. This is where all funding should.
Thank you. Your time is up. We'll go to our next speaker. Chris, you can begin your comments.
Okay. Hello. Yeah, this is Chris Brown. I appreciate the the board's interest in this and bringing some very interesting items before. I appreciate Davia and her team's efforts on this. But one thing that I find kind of the big elephant in the room is, and it's something that you, as this board, could easily take care of on your own, is removing the VMT thresholds that you've put in place in September. This alone is killing any development in the unincorporated areas. This is not a state mandate. This is something that you can do as a board, and you decided the thresholds. If you look at the traffic that comes down from Temecula every day, 60, 70,000 cars, people are living in Riverside. Not because it's necessarily better than San Diego, but that's the place where they can afford housing. And Riverside County and San Bernardino counties have all instituted thresholds that are much more easy for development to occur and are not restricting. So I appreciate what this your team and the staff has done with regards to these options, but none of these things do anything to actually start housing. You start from a premise that you're going to help developers with speedy recovery, speedy reviews, et cetera, et cetera. But that's assuming that they're going to even apply for any sort of housing in this county, and they're not. Home builders have said, myself, I've testified in front of the Planning Commission that this board has instituted thresholds and instituted policies that kill development. There are no more development going on in this unincorporated counties because of the policies like VMT. I'd ask that you would just simply re-examine it and look at what other counties like San Bernardino and Riverside County are doing, and they're allowing for development. Again, you have barriers in front of development that you've created, and I would strongly recommend.
Your time is up. We'll go to the next speaker.
Good morning, Chair Vargas and Board of Supervisors. My name is Angeli Hoyos, speaking on behalf of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, whose mission is to make the region the best place to live and work. The Chamber is eager to support ways where we can make it faster and easier to build, how we can create more certainty, and reduce regulatory barriers that delay projects. We need to do more to ensure that future generations have a place to live, and the Chamber believes that everyone deserves access to housing during job opportunities. As you review the options today, we want to specifically highlight the short-term actions, noting that staffing up is key and that streamlining the permitting process and providing assured review times is also of importance to our members. We also encourage you to look at the long-term actions related to secret review and reform and ministerial permits in the VMT efficient and infill areas. Exploring all these options are just some of the ways in which we can create more homes in the low and middle income ranges that can help solve our statewide housing crisis and grow our region's economy. We appreciate the PDS team for their commitment to modernizing workplace systems and improving customer service, and we look forward to being a part of collaborative stakeholder discussions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to our next speaker.
Good morning, Chair Vargas and honorable supervisors. My name is Sean Kilkenny. I live at 3945 Lime Drive in Carlsbad. The San Diego region is in a decades-long housing shortage. According to Sandag, quote, between 2013 and 2020, the San Diego region permitted only 52% of total new housing units needed to meet the regional demand. That's an 8,000 unit shortage of homes per year. The lack of housing production is a symptom of a larger problem. Item 12 addresses some of the housing project issues making it through the entitlement process. We support actions to facilitate the production of housing, including those to increase staffing across LUJ, expedited review times for all housing, including keeping board policy A68, improved internal and external county communication and coordination. We also believe that early identification of major project issues, such as no second bites of the apple, and consistency in policy interpretation should be emphasized. We support processes that facilitate ministerial projects, including using checklists and exemptions, providing maximum flexibility to modify projects to meet market realities. And we applaud eliminating duplicative discretionary review whenever permissible. As Chris mentioned, the biggest impediment to housing in the county is the lack of a certified climate action plan and the unknown of the pending VMT mitigation program. We believe these should be addressed simultaneously through the ongoing CAP Smart Growth Alternative, SEIR, by incorporating a VMT analysis, providing appropriate mitigation measures, and making the necessary findings to allow housing projects to move forward. This type of comprehensive planning construct avoids the current piecemeal approach that has frustrated the production of new housing. Staff has critically considered a wide range of options to remove barriers to the provision of housing based on their real-world experience managing projects in the county's current planning and zoning construct. They are best suited to make recommendations on how to improve their own processes. For these reasons, we support item 12 and recommend the board adopt the recommended items and direct staff to continue to work with the development industry.
Thank you. Your time is up. We'll go to our next speaker.
Good morning, Chair Vargas, members of the board, Dan Silver, Endangered Habitats League, based in Los Angeles. We welcome this initiative. It's important. We urge you to focus on the housing types which are in deficit, which are low and medium income, rather than market or above median, particularly multifamily and in low VMT and infill locations. We would like to particularly, however, oppose one of the options up for consideration, which is short-term Action 17. This would provide taxpayer money to subsidize septic systems The trouble is that homes on septic are very often estate lots. They're custom homes. They are not affordable by any stretch of the imagination. They're very destructive of wildlife habitat and farmland, and they are in very high VMT locations. So this is not an appropriate use of taxpayer subsidy, and we urge you to reject that particular item. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Chairwoman Vargas, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you for that, and thank you for all of the work that all of you have done. The PDS team is just pretty fabulous. I know that. I want to say kudos to Supervisor Anderson for asking us to take a deeper dive into how we can break barriers, remove barriers for housing and facilitating the county's pro-housing jurisdiction. I think it's important to mention that being one of 4 counties that's designated a pro-housing designation allows us to really go after additional funding, and so thank you for all the work that you've done. There's 58 counties in the state of California, just as a reminder, so we're one of 4, and I think it's a big deal. So with that, I wanted to make sure that as we're looking at our goals and the county being able to review our parenting and new housing development, I think this is really critical to addressing the housing crisis, and also as we're thinking about alternatives for our communities. And so what I wanted to do is go over the first short-term actions. I want to propose a motion, and then we can have a discussion so we can move forward. So I want to ask that we, and I know you have the action sheet in here, right? So here we go. So move to support item 1, 2, 3A, 4, 5A, 5B. Oh, come on. All right, move to support item 1, 2, 3A, 4, 5A, 5B, 5C, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. These are all under short-term actions. Everybody got it? Yep. Do you have the worksheet on top of that, or do you want to just maybe? No, it's fine.
So the only item, just as clarification, would be 3B would not be incorporated into your recommendation.
Yeah.
The rest of all the short-term items on your action sheet would be.
Yeah.
And also 16 and 17.
I think she hadn't gone to that.
No.
I'm not doing.
But 10 and 11 are like that.
I know, I'm just giving you my recommendations first, and then we can have a discussion. How about that? All right?
We are confused because
She included
I do too. I have 10 and 11.
Yeah,
10 and 11
and
are.
12, and 13. Yeah, no problem. You want me to read them again? Okay.
that would be another way to describe it.
No, and the short-term actions, everything except 5B, I swear, I heard my colleagues say everything except 5B.
And,
16 and 17.
and 3B.
Yeah.
3B and, yeah.
Let's say it again. So 3B is not in motion.
Yeah.
What else is not in motion?
So far, that's it. We've only gotten to 13 so far.
So 5B is available in the house.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just giving you the ones, unless you want me to tell you no on which ones, so no on 14, no on 15, no on 16, and no on 17. And then midterm actions.
Madam Chair, did you want to go through the short term and get it done and then go on?
Why don't we do
Because I'm
that?
happy to
Sure.
second that.
Why don't we do that? So do you have any questions on that one, on the short term?
So just to confirm one more time. That your motion is, it does not include 3B, it does not include 14.
Well, I think what I wanted to do in a motion, I don't think it's appropriate to put all the no's on it, but if you want me to tell you the no's, I can do the no's too. I'm not asking us to support item,
Just wonder if you just do the like, just do the short term first and then?
Well, that's what I was doing.
That's what she all do, that's all she had. Those are all in short term. So if you look at the sheet, short term has actions 1 through
Give me a minute,
17.
Supervisor. Let's have one person manage this board today. And so, right now, okay, so just I want to be clear. What I was providing you was the items that I'm recommending. I prefer not to do the no, because there's no need for that. But if you want to discuss each of those items, we can. And so what I said to you was, I am supporting items 1, 2, 3A, 4, 5A, 5B, 5C, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. We can have a discussion if you would like, if you're interested on 3B, I'm saying I'm not supporting that, but if you want to have a discussion on that, we can. If you want to have a discussion on item 14, 15, 16, and 17, which are also for consideration of the board as part of short term, but those are not things that I'm recommending, happy to have that conversation. Does that make sense? So I'm just proposing the ones that I want to move forward in my motion, that I think are based on the recommendations that board has provided and the work and what we've heard from constituents. Those are the items, but I'm open to having a discussion. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So any additional questions or recommendations on the short items? So if you look at the short items, Supervisor Desmond, they're from 1 to 16, and I've only recommended, 17, but I've only recommended 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 out of the 17. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, first of all, I guess I don't need to second it because my colleague already did, but I would third it. But I just would say, I just want to appreciate staff's work on this. Again, like I think there was a lot of creativity here. And, you know, this is such an important issue for our whole community is moving forward on housing. I think that I support the ones that my colleague put forward for short term. And I also think that your flag.
Sorry about that.
So I support what my colleague has said. I agree with those ones. Personally, I would be pretty strongly against 3B, 16, and 17. But feel the rest I think are great. And I just want to commend staff for taking my colleague's motion and item around housing barriers and sort of really going deep and being ambitious. And I want to say to you, Supervisor Anderson, when you brought this, I thought, really, is anything great going to come of this? But something great has come of it, so I'm very glad you brought it forward. And I'm sure I'll have more things to say in midterm and long term, but just wanted to speak on the short term.
Okay, I have, I guess, a question. So 16 and 17 are out on this motion as not part of the short term. So I guess I don't understand why on affordable housing for the building permit fee waiver, why we would not support a building fee waiver on affordable housing on this action, and the VMT, and on 16B, the VMT efficient infill building permit fee waiver. I don't quite understand why we would not, you don't want that.
No, not at this time. Do you want to explain how it works so you can better?
Chairwoman Vargas, Supervisors, for purposes of the fee waivers, that's the question. So really, policy determination and decision for purposes of whether it's for the affordable housing or the VMT efficient infill, whether you would like to invest those dollars for purposes of a fee waiver. I don't know if we have any information on what is the cost of the affordable housing.
Well, you've got it in here, 300 grand.
I mean, just for each of the permits that come across this.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, and affordable housing developers already get a lot of incentives as well. So it's not like we're not, right? I mean, you want to go ahead and then I'll turn over to Supervisor.
Through the chair, to the question of the cost per affordable housing building permits, they range based on the square footage and the volume of them that are in a single project. You get essentially efficiencies if you're doing several of them in one project, but they're roughly $6,000 a unit.
And then there are packages, and I know David Estrella is here as well, so for purposes of the types of incentives, whether they're federal or other state or other incentives for affordable housing, so going to the vice chair's point. But David, anything that you want to add for purposes of the deliberations?
Good morning, Supervisors. Thank you, Sarah. I think the only thing I could add is that, of course, anything that adds to the subsidies that the county already makes available through the Innovative Housing Trust Fund, Home Investment Partnership, development funds, and other permanent local housing allocation from the state. So those funds are already made available through the county to developers as an incentive to build housing. I'm sure that the development community reflects their need to hopefully reduce costs on the whole. So I guess what I would say is this: the county offers subsidies. Affordable housing developers would love to have less fees to pay, and the policy decision is balancing those two together. Thank you.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I guess for further comment or discussion, I don't know. I would like to see these fee waivers. I mean, 6,000, I know it doesn't sound like much to us, but especially when we work with millions and billions here. But, you know, when it's expressed that the government keeps putting on more and more fees and we're 40% of the cost of it, to me, anywhere we can cut or give a break, 6,000 in an affordable housing unit might be a big item. And then for the VMT efficient, I mean, we've already, because we went with the regional model, our VMT efficient areas are very few and far between. And so, I don't know, I'd be in favor of those, but I understand it's not part of your motion. The only thing, 3B is other housing. So you've got workforce housing, but then other housing. I think we should have all housing included under this plan and not pick winners or losers. We're short in every area. So to say, okay, and I get we're short in workforce housing, which, you know, I'm not even sure what that really means as opposed to other housing, but I guess I'll be supportive, but I'm sorry to see 3B not being supported and any fee waivers where we can reduce government fees be a part of this. I think the best thing we could do is go back to the unincorporated model for VMT as opposed to the regional model. But okay, I understand now, and unfortunately, in my opinion, 3B and 16 and 17 should be in there, but I'll support the motion. Something's better than nothing.
No, thank you. I just want to kind of explain to my colleague's question, you know, a lot of my rationale. I mean, what's really important to note here is that none of this is paid for in our current budget. And I'm not going to be supportive of us just spending money willy-nilly, right? So we're going to have to figure out how to pay for this. And I think that's where my concern comes from the fee waivers, is I think we've had a very, you know, we have a policy around full cost recovery, and that's important. So, you know, of course, how supportive I am of building 100% affordable and building in the VMT efficient and infill areas. And I think the rest of these measures go really far in that direction. But I do think we have to just acknowledge that maybe that's something we'll have to come back to next year when we're able to kind of look ahead and think about the budget, because this is not in this year's budget. So that's what I would say on that front.
And just, I didn't put this out there, this was, I guess, the overall package here, I think was one time of 16 million, what was it?
17 million.
For the short terms, up to this point, 10.4 million for purposes of the one-time Supervisor Desmond.
Okay.
And then 4.8 for ongoing. But the total figures, yes, 16.8 million for purposes of the one-time, and then the 4.8.
But the 4.8 is the ongoing dollars.
That's
to be honest with you, I'd be willing to take money out of reserves to pay for housing. We're in a deficit of housing, and the sooner we get it caught up, the better. But I get it.
We can have that conversation in a minute.
Well,
if you want to.
I'd be willing to keep 3B in there and have it paid for with the reserves.
Yeah,
I will.
I won't. So
I would support that.
All right, so you're not supporting all housing, just the workforce housing at 3A.
Well, I think there's a.
That says other housing.
I think, you know, part of the conversation that we've had is sort of what are our priorities. If you look at our reading numbers, if you look at where we're at, we haven't built what we need, especially for our workforce, you know, community. So I think that this is a good first step. It doesn't mean that all of this will be off the table for future discussion. I think that for now, where we are and the priorities we're trying to get to, I think this is a good first step. And so we have a motion and a second. What we're going to do is, go ahead.
Thank you. I was in the queue, just saying.
Yes, sorry.
First of all, Sarah and Davia and Vince and the whole team, outstanding job. You know, I was optimistic that we'd find something, and I wanted to be competitive with San Diego, the city, but you gave us options to make us a regional leader on this issue. Fantastic work. I'm really tickled with the outcome. I do have a quick question for Sarah and her staff. On action item 14, I wanted to fully understand what that item would do to make sure I understand what I'm voting on here.
My apologies, I was speaking with Ryan for
Item
which
14.
item? Item 14. So the infrastructure flexibility component,
right.
That's the one that you've got the questions. Mark, would you like to just share some of how that would work for us?
Yeah, Supervisor Anderson. So if the board were to direct us to look at that item, we would do further stakeholder outreach and then come back to the board with some potential options on how we could explore maybe being more flexible in terms of the infrastructure requirements on private development projects. In the staff report, we kind of outlined some of the areas of focus would be like above ground utilities, sidewalks, curb and gutter, those sorts of things that are, you know, right now a requirement for private development projects. And there's some flexibility, but we could explore even making it easier for projects to move forward without having to implement some of that expensive infrastructure.
And what kind of a dollar amount would we be looking at for that?
Supervisor, to do the stakeholder engagement, we wouldn't need any additional funding to explore further options. In terms of the actual implementation, once we have a more refined scope of discussing it with stakeholders, and we would report back on options, we would have a better idea of cost estimate we could include in that time to make any potential changes.
And if we looked at that, would there be the way you're describing it, I want to make sure I fully understand it, by reaching out into the community and talking to pros in that arena, they may have ways of cutting costs for future development or for future housing. Is that the hope?
That's correct, Supervisor, and maybe some suggestions on areas of focus that we could explore when we come back with the options.
Thank you very much.
Can you also address a little bit around this issue, specifically around what it means to like sort of the underinvested communities around infrastructure? Because I think that that's an important item to bring up on this issue.
Chairwoman Vargas, if I could elaborate, I think that the thought process on our end, and of course we would talk further with stakeholders, would really be to focus on areas where, for example, a developer is required to build a sidewalk to nowhere, where there is not where there's not sidewalk in the surrounding area, or would be required to underground utilities where the surrounding area is almost completely wouldn't have above ground utilities. I think in terms of providing infrastructure for those communities that may be more urbanized and disadvantaged and not have historical investments of infrastructure, part of the focus of the development feasibility analysis would be to really focus our infrastructure efforts and commitments in those areas.
Okay.
Madam Chair, since there's no additional cost, the upside is we may learn something that's helpful in moving forward. Would you consider amending your motion? And I'm happy to second it if we add 14.
Sure, 14.
Woohoo! You know, one of the issues that's not in this, but I just want to put it out there, is there's a lot of homes that were in developments years ago, maybe 50 years ago, that were built in the unincorporated that are on septic. And now as we're moving forward with this last rain, a lot of those septic homes are becoming septic in a different way because of all the rain that we've had this year, which was unusual. And one of the things I was thinking is, if they're looking at inclusionary housing and infill, bringing the sewer to that area may have cost economies of scale that we can address and bring sewer lines to everybody, which would get a lot of people off septic. We know that sewer lines are far better than septic. So, that's another aspect that maybe when you're looking out there, by location, we may have opportunities. I'm happy. I think I've said everything I needed to say.
Okay.
Other than thank you again so much for the great work.
All right, so let's go ahead and vote on the short term first. We're going to do each one just to make sure that the team is clear. And so based on our recommendations, we have for the short term actions 1, 2, 3A, 4, 5A, 5B, 5C, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present voting aye.
Okay, and then my second motion my motion for the medium-term actions is to recommend forward actions 1, 2, and 3. I'm not recommending action 4 and 5, but happy to have a discussion on those items.
I'm happy to second. And let me just say a couple things. Super excited about expanding tiny homes on wheels. I think that's a great idea. I think it creates a lot of flexibility. There's been so much innovation in building and building design and a lot of, I think, demand from communities to say, hey, can we create more housing opportunities and think outside the box? And why are we putting barriers in the way of that kind of innovation? So I love the tiny homes on wheels. I think the pre-home approved home plans is great as well. It's just, how do we let folks move more quickly once something's pre-approved? Same for the technology phase. And so anyways, I think those 3 are great. I'm definitely pretty staunchly against 4 and 5. I think it's a slippery slope. It could lead to all sorts of unintended consequences, and it's not given, however, how all the other things we have on our plate right now in terms of trying to implement what I think are, sort of much more promising near and medium-term priorities on housing. I'd really like to see our staff focus on the things that I think have the biggest bang for the buck. So, thank you.
Okay. Any additional discussion?
I had a question, I guess, for staff. Okay, if this is only 1, 2, and 3, then 4 and 5 are more discussion with stakeholder engagement. So if by not agreeing to 4 and 5, you're not going to do that stakeholder engagement?
Supervisor Desmond, that's correct.
So can you explain what that means though? Because you're asking for $380,000 for additional stakeholder engagement. Is that what it is? Like on 4?
Chairwoman, for the midterm, our recommendations are short-term actions 1, tiny homes on wheels, short-term action 2, pre-approved plans, and short-term action 3 for additional IT upgrades. We were not recommending short-term actions 4 and 5.
Oh, no. I just wanted you to explain why would you even put them on there, I guess, if you're not recommending them, right? So tell me why action 4 and action 5.
Apologies. They were included for consideration as feedback that we have heard from stakeholders over time.
So I just want to make sure that it's that it's clear what it all meant, because I'm not sure. I think if people read it like this.
Well, that's what I was asking. So you're not going to implement any more stakeholder outreach or engagement on 4 and 5. Okay.
And it also incorporated things that we would be moving forward. It wasn't solely the fiscal allocation wasn't solely for stakeholder engagement. It was also to bring forward some options for board consideration.
Well, I guess just on streamlining modification to approved projects, why wouldn't we be doing that anyway?
Supervisor Desmond, through the chair, we currently in our code allow projects to change after approval at the board or the planning commission, but it's limited to a certain percentage. And if they go over that certain percentage, they kind of have to go back through the process to revise the project. This particular item would look at expanding that percentage, that level of change that's allowed on projects after they're approved. The concerns that we had noted in there is that there is a potential for a lot of the components of the project to move and have a detrimental effect on the community. So that would be one downside of pursuing an option like that. But should the board direct it, we could certainly explore looking at those options and then bring them back to the board.
Okay, I didn't realize it was about the percentage of the change as opposed to just the process itself. Okay, I get it. Thanks.
Okay. All right, any additional discussion? Supervisor Anderson?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, please vote.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
All right. The next item, action item is the long-term actions, 3 to 5 years. Staff recommendations were action 1 and 2. So I'll make a motion to support action item 1 and item 2. Is there a second? Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah, I got a question. Sorry.
Don't apologize.
This is big in my district. You know,
It's big in all of our
housing
districts. That's
and
why we're here.
Making sure, I mean, potential's big. On the programmatic EIR, we asked this question, I think my staff did offline, that it was going to cost an extra $1.2 million if we were to move up that programmatic EIR. Is that right? So it's right now at $3 million. And it would cost more to get that done sooner rather than later? Is that
Supervisor,
true?
through the chairwoman, yes, that is correct. We anticipate to expedite it, to complete it sooner than the $3 million would require additional consultant resources, as well as more focus on our outreach efforts to make sure that we remain transparent and engage with the community.
Well, the BIA called in about this one, and to me, if we can get this programmatic EIR done sooner rather than later, I think we've got a greater potential of builders coming to the table and actually building projects. Because what it would tell them, it shows them what mitigations and what impacts they would have. If we got to wait 3 to 5 years for this to come out, I think this would, potentially for all areas in housing, if we could get this programmatic EIR done sooner, because then the applicants don't have to do this. This is a wonderful step for them. I'd be willing to spend reserves, the additional, I guess, 1.2 million in reserves, if we could take that out, to move this programmatic EIR up as soon as possible, so that with this we can get more housing units built instead of waiting. So I'd put that as a friendly amendment to the motion for the program.
Give me a second. So this is the long-term action items, and you're speaking to action item 1?
Yes, action item 1, to move that up, make it a short-term action item, or get it moving quicker.
So I want clarification from staff, because in your annotation in the document that's presented to the board, it says that these actions could take significantly reduced regulations applied to, so what you're recommending already is reducing some of that time. So can you better explain to us this particular initiative?
Yes, the recommendation is for a programmatic EIR, which would take up to 3 years to prepare. Once that's in place, that will then provide reduced timeframes for developments that come in that will use the programmatic EIR that's already there. The proposal that's in the board letter is for a programmatic EIR for areas within the VMT efficient and infill areas, and that would include the development feasibility areas and other locations within those pre-identified desirable development areas.
Okay. And so you're asking for,
Do it sooner right away.
and is that even possible?
Yes, we've taken a look at that, and it could be done sooner with more consultant resources. We estimate that could cost an additional $1.2 million to advance it to 18 months approximately.
Moving, I think, the better, and there's a cost to it.
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts, questions and thoughts. So my understanding was that your recommendation is to complete the development feasibility analysis first, which would then identify where zoning is even a barrier. And at the same time, we're developing our slough. And so that when then we do the programmatic EIR, then we don't need to do it again because we don't mess it up, right? Like, I think that was my understanding of why you had it as a longer term thing, was that there was 2 building blocks that needed to happen first, and that if we didn't do these 2 building blocks first, we'd be spending a bunch of money and probably potentially have to go do it again, because it might not be in alignment with our development feasibility analysis, or could be focused sort of like willy-nilly all over the map instead of just like really focused on the areas where zoning is actually a barrier, and also might not be in alignment with the slough. So I'm super supportive of the rezoning of the 4 infill areas, and I know that that does require a programmatic EIR. So I am just want to say to staff and to the team, I think this is great. I definitely want to make that happen if that's the concern of my colleague. I'm very on board with rezoning the 4 infill areas, and I know that the programmatic EIR is required to do that. But my concern is that we have to do the groundwork first. We have to lay the groundwork, or else we're going to spend a bunch of money and potentially have to do it again because it's looking at the wrong barriers or not in alignment with the SLUF. So that's where I'm at, is I don't want to dump money down a rat hole and then have to do it again. So I think what I would say is,
This is not shoving money down a rat hole, sorry.
it would absolutely be a waste of money to do something twice.
Well, and that was a question.
And that's what they answered. They said we could do it faster. And what I'm saying is my concern is that if we don't put the building blocks in place and we don't do the development feasibility analysis first, and we don't align this with the SLUF, we could end up having to do it twice.
Let me have Sarah. Sarah, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Just for some clarification, I believe that the intent would be here, Vice Chair, that once we have the development feasibility analysis and keeping in mind the sustainable land use framework components that are also moving forward, I believe the supervisor's desire was from that time, it would take us 36 months to be able to move forward with the programmatic EIR. But with some additional resources allocated and dedicated to it, we could reduce that time frame to 18 months. I believe that's the intent.
Okay, that was not what I heard. I thought he was saying 18 months from today.
We would not be able to do it 18 months
as long as we're all clear
today.
onto that. What I'm saying is we have to do the development feasibility analysis first, and we have to do the SLUF first. And then once we get that done, I'd be happy to go faster on the
I'm not
programmatic
asking to
ER.
skip any steps or be redundant at all. Just if we can get it done, and it takes dollars, I guess, to move it up, and I think it's dollars well spent.
I didn't understand that as your proposal. I thought you wanted to skip the 2 building block steps.
Well,
But as
we
long as we're doing
got to do what we
those
got to
2
do.
things first.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Just for clarity, so which items would we be voting for?
This is action 1 and action 2, and then we would modify action 1 to increase that one-time cost, right? So can you modify?
That's correct. So we would be looking at $4.2 million to expedite that programmatic EIR from that 36-month time frame to the 18 months.
After the 2 other components are done.
Correct. After we've got the feasibility analysis and we know where we're going on the sustainable land use framework.
So I want to hear from Ebony before I accept the motion. Ebony?
Thank you. The total fiscal impact associated with the actions that have already been taken and with this motion would increase the total cost of all things one-time and ongoing to $14.9 million. That includes program revenues of $2.5 million, an assumption of ongoing general purpose revenue that would be redirected from other areas through the change letter process of $4.6 million, and use of current year resources general fund balance of $7.7 million. We do have those resources available within the current budget, the $7.7 million that we discussed based on yesterday's report.
Okay. And so, but it's only $1 million for what he's asking for, right?
Additional.
1.2 additional. Okay, that's correct.
Madam Chair, if I may, 2 quick things. One, I had a recent meeting with our assessor, Jordan Marks, and I asked him about what would this additional housing mean to us, and if we were able to move forward on the VMT infill, 5,800 houses, that would be between $6,000 and $9,000 per house. So we'd be looking at between $34 and $52 million in additional tax revenue to the county. So it far exceeds any cost. And then if we were to look, I think Ebony's going to be coming back to us, or somebody's going to be coming back to us here shortly, on the Evergreen Fund of $79 million. Perhaps we could borrow against the Evergreen Fund.
Council.
And in that way, not have to touch our reserves, not have to go to a 4-person vote, but a 3-person vote, and we can move ahead knowing that the work we're doing is going to pay for itself in perpetuity, right? Taxes aren't coming down. So The other question I had is, we don't have anything in addition that we're going to be voting for in the long term. Because I saw that action item 6A, what would item 6A do for us, Sarah, if you could describe that?
Sure. I mean, I can absolutely set the stage and then turn it over to the team. Our grading ordinance is truly one of the areas that we do need to make some improvements to. So I think as staff, we recognize that. And these are a couple of other building blocks for purposes of our grading ordinance that the team had proposed. So with that, I'll turn it over to PDS.
Supervisor Anderson, through the chair. The changes to the grading ordinance would cover three different phases, basically. The first one would be that our grading ordinance is discretionary. That means that anybody that applies for a grading permit has to go through a CEQA process if there's no exemption that would apply. So it can really make it a longer, more complicated and expensive process. One of the things that's happened recently is there's been a lot of state law that have made a lot of housing projects by right and ministerial. But our grading ordinance remains the same, and it still calls that a discretionary review. That first phase would basically make our grading ordinance align with state law and make those by right housing projects ministerial through the county. So much easier, simpler, less costly process. Going beyond that, the next couple of phases that we could evaluate would be looking at making it ministerial or by right in the VMT efficient and infill areas if certain criteria are met. And then going beyond that and making it ministerial across the entire unincorporated area if there are certain criteria that are met. We would need the additional items identified in the sheet for us to explore this and
Sure.
bring it back.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If you wouldn't mind amending that in, I'd really appreciate it. You know, when I look at this and I think, every time that we have an ordinance that's not aligned with state law, we put people between choosing whose fine they're going to pay. And as a legislator at the state level, it drove me nuts because a business shouldn't have to choose between a federal fine, a state fine, and a local fine. We should all be aligned with policy that allows people a clear path. So I don't know if that's something that you can get to, but I would appreciate it if you could.
6A? Yep. So we're adding 6A and we're adding Supervisors Desmond's additional amount for the ERR, right?
Thank you.
Okay.
I accept your amendment as the second, just saying.
It's your amendment, sir. We got it. All right. So long-term actions, we're going to, for 3 to 5 years, we're going to approve action item number 1, number 2, and number 6A, and the amendment to action, or the friendly amendment to action number 1 is the adding 1.2, right? Million to this. So, all right, with that.
Sorry, Joel opened up the grading set one. I'm not going to ask to add another one at all. I'll leave the motion alone, but I would like to suggest that as under the grading ordinance updates, if there's ever an opportunity, I'm hearing from our farmers out there that unfortunately, and I'm not sure how all this works, but if we could allow legitimate agriculture operations to graze their land without needing a grading permit. Because I don't know, it sounds weird to me that farmers, they whatever, use their fields for different purposes, and if they use it for grazing, that they need a grading permit, which to me sounds silly. So I don't know that if that could be looked at as, you know, when you're looking at all these other things, I'd appreciate, maybe I need a board letter or something for that one, but
I don't know that you need a board letter. How about we direct the team to look into that and provide feedback to all of us? All of us have. I have some farmers in my district too, so believe it or not.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present voting aye.
Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the staff recommendations, the ones that have the first page of the worksheet. So I'm recommending, my motion is to recommend recommendation 1, so the CEQA exception. Recommendation 2, receive options, and then I would like to amend 3 and 4 to adjust the need to touch the general fund reserve. I believe it's important that we fund the pressing short-term actions as our operational budget allows. And then as more funding is identified, we fund the remaining actions, right? And then I also think that we can agree that the actions that we saw in the work plan and fund these actions on an ongoing basis. And that way we have a bigger vision on what actions we want to take and have phased out approach when funding is identified. So I'd like to amend recommendation 3 to direct the CAO to fund one-time costs associated with actions through project general fund balance and continue providing progress updates on these items. And then I'd like to recommend, the recommendation for action number 4 is to direct the CAO to fund actions approved, including enterprise-wide program and service reallocations through the CAO change letter process for the recommended operation plan process. And then finally, to support recommendation 5, which is the competitive procurement process. And I'm not recommending number 6.
For A and B.
Oh, for A and B, yes. Right? Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Supervisor Anderson, did you have comments?
No, you won't kick me off.
Sorry.
Okay, Vice Chair?
Yes, I do have comments.
Okay.
And questions. I actually have some questions for Ebony. So just, I want to clarify, the chairwoman's motion is very complex, so I want to make sure we're all understanding and following. The two that I just wanted to clarification on was recommendations 3 and 4, because those were amendments. And my understanding is of the chairwoman's motion is that this would fund the one-time costs based on available general fund resources, and that the appropriations and staffing would be redirected from county program and service reallocations, and so that you would be sort of looking over the coming months to fund all of these items as money becomes available, so that we're not dipping into the reserves. Is that an appropriate understanding of the chairwoman's motion?
Thank you for that question. Generally, yes, there will be no action to use reserves for the one-time items that were voted on by the board. We will look to current year appropriations and just redirect those and come back if we need to make any adjustments. As it relates to the ongoing cost for fiscal year, excuse me, I'm already in 23-24. That's where we'll need to make adjustments through the CAO change letter. So let me just restate that. The one-time cost will be absorbed through the current 22-23 budget, and the ongoing cost will be adjusted through the CAO change letter so that they'll be incorporated into the budget.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much. And so it's more like when the change letter comes back, and as we move forward in quarterly adjustments, you'll be able to look at where we're throwing off fund balance, like here and there in various parts of a department, and make these investments #1 priority.
We will look at the CAO recommended change letter for fiscal year 23-24 and make recommendations for service level adjustments or implementation of operational efficiencies to redirect resources from other parts of the enterprise to support the activities that were approved here today. So we won't wait until quarterly status adjustments. It will be a budget adjustment.
Thank you. I really appreciate that clarification. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the last couple of years looking at our budgets is that we definitely have some parts of our operation that tend to seem to throw off like lots of fund balance all the time. And, how can we just make sure that those resources are being, directed, as my colleague has identified, into these like really critical areas around housing, as opposed to just sort of sitting as a cushion in various parts of our operation that aren't using those funds. So I think I'm pretty interested in how do we more efficiently use our enterprise's resources instead of creating like huge fund balance cushions. Instead, like, let's put this into housing because this is important.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
And Chairwoman Vargas, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present, voting aye.
All right, look at government working for people. All right, that's it. The next item on the agenda is we're gonna make sure we call the remainder of the public speakers for non-agenda public comment. I want to say thank you again to the team for doing such a fantastic job, and look forward to hearing from you and all the success moving forward. So you can leave. Sorry. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We still have three requests to speak on matters not listed on the agenda. All come in via phone. For those that have requested to speak via phone, if you could please dial into the conference line now and using the instructions that were provided to you, and we will give you a moment to do so.
Thank you, Ebony. We appreciate you.
We will now hear from those that requested to speak by phone. Again, when it is your turn to speak, you will be unmuted and you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'd like to remind the callers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking, and we will begin with our first caller.
Ann Riddle. Thank you for this opportunity to share some information that has come out from the California Department of Public Health. It's come out from the Substance and Addiction Prevention Branch of the California Department of Public Health. They're announcing their new marijuana education and prevention campaign, finally, that they call Mind Over Marijuana. And they emphasize several areas that are attractive for young people to follow up on their website and gain more information. And the one that they lead with is information regarding mental health issues that adults would probably frame it this way. They frame it this way: school, work, relationships, money, the future. There's a lot of stress about these days. Weed may seem like an easy way to escape, but in reality, it can make stress and anxiety even harder to manage. And this is all done with great graphics. And then it goes on to say, it doesn't matter if you smoke it, vape it, take it as an edible. Once THC, the active chemical in weed, enters your bloodstream, it travels around your body and to your brain. But THC does more to your brain than you may think. It binds to receptors responsible for controlling your emotions, and there's little pictures for each of these: stress, anxiety, fear, and dopamine production. Then it gives a crisis line number that I was thinking would be wonderful if the county would put on their website for any teen who is struggling with their marijuana use and with mental health issues. It's a live, trained crisis counselor who's available 24/7, and the number is 800-843-5200. I mention this because I got a newsletter from our high school principal. And
Thank you. Your time is up. We'll go to our next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Lippett. I advocate for policies that protect children, youth, and young adults and the general public that are free of economic conflicts of interest. But the county has allowed the marijuana industry to be the primary source of marijuana education. That has allowed the marijuana industry to mislead, misinform, and even lie about the dangers posed by high marijuana potency products, especially to an adolescent's still developing brain. To postpone the inevitability of exposing an addiction industry for its predatory marketing practices, maximizing high-potency products to increase addiction, creating products that appeal to youth or can pass as innocuous items instead of highly potent drug delivery devices. Blaming the individual is a favorite strategy. It allows them to avoid accountability for their practices, as the tobacco industry did for 50 years. Neither children nor their parents should be blamed for failing to recognize the extremely dangerous marijuana edibles and what they pose for children. The likelihood of confusing them with commercial candies was the point. The county's silence is a message in and of itself that warnings were unnecessary. Some parents may even feel a sense of relief to learn that their child is only using marijuana. They have been led to believe that marijuana is helping their teen cope with depression or social anxiety. They are unaware that heavy marijuana use can quickly escalate into frightening mental health problems such as paranoia, hallucinations, or psychosis. The marijuana industry should be held accountable for the misinformation they have promoted. The county should be held accountable for its silence. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chairwoman Vargas, not seeing any other callers, that concludes public comment on non-agenda public communication this morning.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone that participated today. We're now going to proceed with the closed session from yesterday's agenda. Can you call the speakers, please?
Thank you, Chairwoman Vargas. We have 5 total requests to speak, 2 individuals in person and 3 requesting to speak by phone. I'd like to also note for the record, we did not receive any e-comments on this item. For any members of the public that requested to speak on this item by phone, if you could please dial into the conference line now using those instructions that were provided to you. We will begin with the in-person speakers. As your name is called, if you could please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. I'd like to invite forward Truth and Audra. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board, and if you could please begin by stating your name for the record.
Yeah, hopefully it's just me you guys gotta deal with, huh? All right, it's Truth. Case A is Abiding Place Ministries, a church, versus Gavin Newsom. If Pasadena's Harvest Rock Church and Harvest International Ministry can win against Newsom, then all churches can. They should all sue. Back in 2021, Newsom had to pay over $1.3 million in attorney's fees, and the state of California could no longer impose discriminatory restrictions upon any houses of worship. Imagine that. They had to follow the law. Skip that. Case D is Mikkel Miles versus the County of San Diego. In 2014, deputies pulled over Miles while he was driving with his brother just blocks from their house. Sheriff Deputy Jeremy Banks beat Miles in the back of the head and then ordered his German Shepherd to attack him while he was handcuffed and restrained by 2 other sheriff's deputies. Deputies arrested Miles despite neighbors actually sticking up for him. U.S. District Court Judge John Houston sanctioned the county for not producing records. And I know that's Kelly Martinez's work right there. That showed since 2015, Deputy Banks was involved in at least 7 incidences involving excessive force. Case G. This is one of the best lawsuits I have seen. It's the Protect Our Communities Foundation versus the County of San Diego because of the toxic decarbonization framework we heard about today. It's even filed under toxic environmental as a toxic tort, which means the plaintiffs claim that exposure to a chemical or dangerous substance caused personal injury. The Protect Our Communities Foundation's board of directors includes Lori Saldana and Diane Jacobs. The foundation is even working with Backcountry Against Dumps and Donna Tisdale to sue people from the U.S. Department of Energy and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I really hope they all win and destroy the regional decarbonization framework that we've heard about today and just keeps passing. Even though Jim's stuff was pretty good, having a local analysis, but I know that's not going to go anywhere. That's why Terra supports it. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for Audra. Not seeing any other callers calling in. Chairwoman Vargas, that concludes public comment on this item.
All right, with that, we go into closed session. Thank you.
The board will now recess into closed session to continue consideration of those matters listed under item 37 on yesterday's agenda. If there are any reportable actions, they will be reported out after the conclusion of closed session today.